Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto becomes a hero in MHA and gets a harem with all of Class 1A girls? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Maelstrom arrives. The world tore itself apart without a sound. One moment, there was the scent of pine and wet earth, the familiar weight of a mission scroll tucked into his flak jacket, and the next, there was only a sensation of being unmade. It was not like a body flicker or even the gut-wrenching pull of a reverse summoning. This was a deeper, more fundamental violence, a feeling of being shred. Dead atom by atom and stitched back together incorrectly. Naruto's first breath was a gasp, his lungs burning with the unfamiliar taste of chlorinated air. His senses, honed by years of war and a life spent on the knife's edge, screamed at him. The ground beneath his feet was smooth, sterile tile, not the forest floor. The air was thick with the coppery tang of fear and something else, ozone, like the aftermath of a lightning jutsu. He was in a vast, dome-like structure. A fabricated landscape of mountains, ruins, and a placid lake spread out before him, all contained under a massive glass ceiling. And it was under siege. Dozens of figures, grotesque and misshapen, swarmed through the artificial biomes. They were not shinobi. Their movements were clumsy, brutish, driven by a chaotic energy he didn't recognize. They were attacking children, teenagers, really, all clad in strange, colorful costumes, fighting with a desperate, frantic energy. His eyes, sharp and discerning, took it all in within a heartbeat. A girl with earphone jacks extending from her lobes sent concussive blasts of sound into a crowd of thugs. Another, with pink skin and horns, created walls of corrosive acid. A boy, with explosive hands fought with the ferocity of a caged animal, his face a mask of rage. They were powerful, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. A hulking brute with arms like stone pillars raw, a massive fist to bring it down on a girl with a gravity-defying brown bob, who was trying to help a smaller boy with purple spheres for hair. The girl's eyes were wide with terror, her own power seemingly exhausted. Naruto didn't think, he acted. The space between him and the girl vanished. He appeared in a blur of orange and black, his hand clamping around the villain's thick wrist. The crunch of bone was sickeningly loud, echoing in the cavernous space. The villain, whose face had been a mask of cruel glee, now wore a look of slack-jawed shock. Naruto didn't give him time to process it. A single, precise palm heel strike to the chest sent the man flying backward, his body skipping across the plaza like a stone on water before crashing into a dozen of his compatriots. Silence fell in their immediate vicinity. The other villains froze, their bloodlust momentarily replaced by stunned confusion. The students stared, their own desperate battles forgotten. Ochako Uraraka felt the pressure vanish. 1 second, a mountain of muscle was about to turn her into a paste, and the next, a flash of orange stood between her and death. He hadn't just saved her, he had done it with an ease that was terrifying. He moved like nothing she had ever seen, not with the explosive bursts of Bakugo or the managed grace of Ida, but with a liquid, predatory certainty. He was tall, with sun-kissed blonde hair that seemed to defy gravity and eyes the color of a summer sky. But it was the whisker-like marks on his cheeks that held her attention, giving his otherwise handsome face a feral, untamed quality. "You all right?" His voice was calm, a low baritone that cut through the lingering adrenaline in her ears. He didn't look at her, his gaze sweeping over the remaining hostiles, assessing and dismissing them in the same instant. Ochako could only manage a nod, her throat suddenly tight. From across the plaza, Kyoka Jiro unplugged her jacks from her boots, the feedback from her heartbeat thrumming in her ears. She had seen him appear from nowhere. No sound, no warning. One moment the space was empty, the next he was there. It wasn't a speed quirk, it was more like he had simply decided to be somewhere else. His posture was relaxed but coiled, like a panther ready to spring. He wore strange, practical clothing, dark pants, a high-collared jacket of orange and black, and shinobi-style sandals that seemed absurdly out of place. Yet, on him, they looked deadly. More villains, emboldened by their numbers, decided to rush him. A man whose fingers elongated into razor-sharp blades lunged forward. while another who could fire bone shards from his skin unleashed a volley. Naruto moved. He swayed to the side, the blades missing him by a hair's breadth. His hand shot out, not to block the bone shards, but to snatch one from the air. With a flick of his wrist, he sent the projectile back at its owner, embedding it deep in the man's shoulder with a pained grunt. In the same fluid motion, he spun, his leg sweeping out in a low arc that shattered the bladed man's knee. A precise chop to the back of the neck, and the man went down, unconscious before he hit the ground. It was over in less than 2 seconds. 2 more villains down, neutralized with brutal, almost surgical, efficiency. Momo Yaoyorozu watched from the entrance, where she stood with a group of her classmates. Her mind, always analytical, struggled to categorize what she was seeing. His quirk, what was it? Super speed, enhanced reflexes, some kind of telekinesis to redirect the projectile. None of it fit. It was too seamless, too integrated. He fought not with a power, but with his entire being. He used his opponent's momentum against them, exploited openings they didn't even know they had. It was a martial art, but one more advanced and deadly than anything she had ever conceived. Who is that guy? Denki Kaminari muttered beside her, his bravado from earlier completely gone. I don't know, Momo whispered back, her eyes wide. But he's incredible. Quote, down in the central plaza, a man covered in disembodied hands scratched furiously at his neck, his voice a dry, rasping hiss. Who is this? He wasn't in the lesson plan. Is he a secret weapon? A new teacher? He turned to the swirling vortex of dark mist beside him. Kurogiri, did you miss someone? No, Tamura Shigaraki, the mist man, Kurogiri, replied, his yellow eyes glowing from within the void. He was not on the school's faculty list. He appeared from nowhere. My warp gates were not involved. Shigaraki's scratching intensified, flakes of dry skin dusting his black shirt. A cheater. I hate cheaters. NPC characters shouldn't just spawn in the middle of a boss fight. He tilted his head, a gesture that was unnervingly bird-like. Well, it doesn't matter. Nomu will handle him. At the edge of the plaza, Shota Aizawa, the pro-hero eraser head, gritted his teeth. He had been handling the main mob, his quirk-canceling stare and capture weapon a blur of motion. But the appearance of this newcomer had thrown a wrench in the villain's plans and his own. The stranger was impossibly fast, unnervingly competent. He fought like a seasoned soldier, not a hero. He disabled, he didn't grandstand, and he was drawing the attention of the ringleaders. Everyone, stay back, Aizawa barked, his voice carrying across the plaza. He landed between Naruto and the main villains. You, in the orange jacket, I don't know who you are, but this is a restricted area. Let the pro-heroes handle this. Naruto's blue eyes met Aizawa's for a fraction of a second. There was no defiance in them. Just a calm, unwavering assessment. You're injured, Naruto stated simply. He had noticed the slight tremor in the hero's left arm, the way he favored his right leg. And you're outnumbered. Before Aizawa could retort, Shigaraki giggled, a sound like scraping nails. Oh, a pro-hero trying to act cool. You can't even handle our grunts. How are you going to handle our anti-symbol of peace? He gestured lazily with a 4-fingered hand. Nomu, kill him. The flashy one first. A monster emerged from behind Kurogiri's portal. It was a horrifying behemoth, larger than a man, with dark purple skin. A beak-like mouth, and a brain gruesomely exposed on the top of its skull. Its eyes were vacant, lifeless. It moved with a speed that defied its bulk, crossing the distance to Naruto in an instant. Look out, yelled a green-haired boy, his face pale with panic. Naruto didn't need the warning. He pushed off the ground, twisting in midair as a fist the size of a cinder block smashed the spot where he'd been standing, shattering the tiles into dust. He landed lightly on his feet, his senses screaming danger. This thing, it wasn't human. The chakra it gave off was a twisted, mangled mess of dozens of signatures, all forcibly stitched together. It felt wrong. Aizawa's hair flew up, his eyes glowing a menacing red as he activated his quirk. Erasure. The Nomu didn't slow. It swung again, a wide, devastating arc. Aizawa dodged, his capture weapon lashing out to wrap around the creature's arm. The Nomu simply flexed, and the high-tensile steel alloy cloth shredded like tissue paper. It doesn't work on him. Hero, Shigaraki rasped gleefully. This Nomu is special. He has multiple quirks. Shock absorption. Super regeneration. You can erase one, but what about the others? The Nomu's fist caught Aizawa in the side, sending him tumbling across the ground with a sickening crack. It was on him in a second, one massive hand pinning him down, the other raised to strike. Tsuyu Asui, the frog-like girl, let out a small, terrified croak. Mr. Aizawa, Mina Ishido, her usual bubbly demeanor gone, covered her mouth in horror. No, the Nomu's fist came down. But it never connected. A blur of orange intercepted it. Naruto stood over Aizawa's prone form, his single hand holding back the monster's colossal fist. The ground beneath his feet cracked under the strain, but he didn't budge. A low growl rumbled in his chest, and for the first time, the student saw a flicker of something truly dangerous in his sky-blue eyes. It was a cold, simmering fury that made the air feel thin. You heard a teacher in front of his students, Naruto said, his voice dangerously quiet. He pushed, and the Nomu, a creature designed to fight all might, stumbled back a step. That's not something I can forgive. Quote, Shigaraki clapped his hands together slowly. Amazing. What a show of strength. But you can't beat him. He was made to kill the symbol of peace himself. He will regenerate from anything you do. As if to prove his point, the Nomu's other hand shot forward, grabbing Naruto by the arm. With a roar, it slammed him into the ground, then again, and again. The impact shook the entire plaza. Stop it, Ochako screamed, tears welling in her eyes. Toru Hagakure, the invisible girl, was practically vibrating with fear. He was trying to protect Mr. Aizawa, but then, the dust began to settle. The Nomu lifted Naruto's seemingly limp body, ready for a final, crushing blow. A voice, low and guttural, echoed from the crater. As that, all you've got? Red energy, thick and malevolent, began to bubble around Naruto's form. It wasn't his own chakra, it was something ancient, something impossibly powerful. The whisker marks on his cheeks darkened, becoming thick and jagged. His teeth elongated into fangs, his eyes shifting from blue to a burning, slitted crimson. The pressure in the air became immense, a physical weight that forced the students to their knees. Kurama's voice echoed in his mind, a deep and rumbling growl of shared indignation. They dare lay their hands on you, Kit. After everything we've been through. Show them what a real monster looks like. Naruto didn't need the encouragement. He let the power flow. The red energy coalesced, forming a miniature sun in his palm. It spun with a sound like 1,000 screeching birds, raw, untamed power compressed into a single point. Rasengan, he snarled, the name of the technique feeling foreign and familiar at the same time on his tongue. He drove the spiraling sphere of chakra into the Nomu's chest. It was not an explosion. It was an erasure. The Nomu's shock absorption was useless against an attack that wasn't about impact, but about grinding its target into nothingness. The creature was hurled backward, a massive, gaping hole torn through its torso. It crashed into the far wall of the facility with enough force to crack the dome's foundation. For a moment, it lay still. Then, horrifyingly, the flesh began to bubble and stretch, the wound slowly, painfully, knitting itself back together. Shigaraki laughed, a crazed, triumphant sound. See, useless. My Nomu is the perfect weapon. You can't kill him. Naruto stood up, the red chakra flaring around him like a cloak. Regeneration has a limit, he stated, his voice a distorted snarl. It requires energy. Let's see how much he has left. He blurred, appearing in front of the regenerating Nomu. He didn't give it a chance to recover. A punch, infused with the fox's demonic chakra, shattered its leg. A kick caved in its ribs. He moved in a whirlwind of orange and red, a relentless, brutal assault that was both terrifying and mesmerizing to watch. Each blow landed with the force of an artillery shell, pulverizing Muse. Clee and bone faster than the creature could heal. The girls of Class 1A could only watch, a mixture of terror and awe holding them captive. His power, it's so destructive, Jiro murmured, her Jax. Picking up the seismic shock of his blows. But he's using it to protect us, Momo countered, her voice filled with a reverence she couldn't explain. He was a monster fighting a monster, and he was on their side. It was a display of power so absolute, so overwhelming, that it broke the villains' morale completely. The lesser thugs, who had been cautiously watching, began to back away, their desire to fight extinguished by the primal fear he inspired. Shigaraki stopped scratching. His breath hitched. This wasn't part of the game. This was a glitch, a bug in the system that was breaking everything. This wasn't a hero. Heroes didn't fight with such unrestrained ferocity. They didn't have killer intent that felt like a physical force. The Nomu, its regeneration finally failing, let out a pathetic, gurgling cry. Naruto grabbed its head with one hand, his other forming a familiar sign. Shadow clones, dozens of them, popped into existence around him, each one glowing with the same hellish red aura. Each one began forming a Rasengan. "It's over," the original Naruto said, his red eyes boring into the Nomu's vacant ones. The clones surged forward, their attacks converging on the monster in a devastating vortex of spiraling chakra. The resulting explosion of power was immense, a blinding white light that forced everyone to shield their eyes. When it faded, there was nothing left of the Nomu but dust. Silence. A profound, echoing silence filled the USJ. Naruto stood in the center of the devastation, the red chakra slowly receding. His breathing was heavy, but he was otherwise unharmed. He looked up, his eyes, now back to their normal blue, scanning the remaining villains. Shigaraki was trembling, not with rage, but with fear. Kurogiri, we're leaving. Game over. Game over, man. The misty portal enveloped him. And in a flash, the two ringleaders were gone. The remaining thugs, seeing their leaders flee, threw down their weapons, surrendering en masse. The tension broke. The students let out a collective, shuddering breath. It was over. They had survived. Naruto's attention immediately went to the injured teacher. He knelt beside Aizawa, his hand glowing with a soft, green energy. A medical jutsu, basic but effective. He began to mend the shattered bones, to seal the worst of the wounds. It was then that the doors to the USJ burst open with a resounding boom. "I am here." All Might stood at the entrance, his iconic smile firmly in place. But the smile faltered as he took in the scene. He saw the defeated villains, the terrified but safe students, the grievously injured Aizawa, and the crater where the Nomu had been utterly annihilated. And in the center of it all, a blonde-haired stranger in an orange jacket, his hand glowing with an unknown power as he healed a fellow hero. The sheer energy radiating from the young man was staggering, a power signature unlike any quirk he had ever encountered. It felt ancient, elemental. The students all turned, IEF washing over them at the sight of the number one hero. But their relief was mixed with confusion. All Might was here, but the battle had already been won. All Might strode forward, his gaze locked on Naruto. He saw the strength, the weariness, the immense power held in check behind those startlingly blue eyes. He stopped a few feet away, the question swirling in his mind. This was no student. This was no pro-hero he recognized. He was something else entirely. The smile finally faded from All Might's face, replaced by an expression of profound, serious inquiry. He looked at the impossible scene of destruction and the impossible young man who had caused it, and asked the only question that mattered. What are you? Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. A hero's heart, a shinobi's spirit. The silence that followed All Might's question was heavier than the Nomu's fists. It was a silence thick with unspoken questions, with the professional assessment of the newly arrived heroes, and with the collective awe of 20 students who had just witnessed something beyond their comprehension. Naruto didn't rise. He kept his glowing green palm steady over Aizawa's chest, his focus absolute. The shattered ribs were knitting back together, the internal bleeding slowly staunching. It was a crude application of medical ninjutsu, but it was keeping the man alive. His gaze lifted, and for the first time, the symbol of peace felt truly scrutinized. Naruto's blue eyes held no fear, no reverence. They held the calm, appraising look of a veteran soldier assessing a potential threat. He saw the imposing figure, the theatrical costume, the forced smile that was now a thin, concerned line. He also saw the faint wisp of steam rising from the man's gargantuan frame, a subtle sign of strain that only a trained eye would catch. This giant was a lighthouse, brilliant and powerful, but the light was flickering. "I'm the one who stopped your problem," Naruto replied, his voice level, cutting through the tension. You're welcome. The other pro heroes who had followed All Might fanned out, their stances wary. The spindly man with speakers on his neck, Present Mike, had his hand raised, ready to unleash a sonic blast. The hero in the space suit, 13, was poised to activate their quirk. They saw not a savior, but an unknown variable of catastrophic power. That's not an answer, kid, a man made of concrete, Smentos said. His voice a low rumble. You took down a villain, yes. But the level of force you used, it's not sanctioned. It's not heroic. Naruto finally pulled his hand away from Aizawa's chest, the green glow fading. The hero's breathing was stable. He had done what he could. He rose to his feet in a single, fluid motion, turning to face the semicircle of costumed adults. Heroic. The word sounded strange on his tongue. I saw a monster about to kill a man in front of his students. I saw children about to be slaughtered by a mob of thugs. Where I come from, you don't hesitate. You don't worry about sanctioned force. You end the threat. His gaze swept over them, and for a moment, they weren't pro-heroes, they were genin facing a Jonin commander. You were late. The accusation, simple and direct, struck home harder than any punch. All Might's already thin smile vanished completely. The boy was right. They were late. If he hadn't been here. Before the standoff could escalate, a new voice cut in. Calm and cheerful, yet carrying an authority that made everyone pause. Perhaps this discussion would be better held in a more comfortable setting. A small, white, furred creature in a sharp suit walked forward from behind the line of heroes. It could have been a mouse, a bear, or a dog, but its eyes held a piercing, unnerving intelligence. This was Principal Nezu, the head of UA. Hi, thank you, Nezu said, his gaze fixed on Naruto, a small, polite smile on his face. For saving our students and our staff. I am in your debt. He gestured with a paw towards the exit. Now, if you would be so kind as to accompany us, I believe we have much to discuss. It was not a request. The interrogation room, though they called it a faculty meeting lounge, was sterile and windowless. Naruto sat in a comfortable chair, a cup of tea he hadn't touched on the table before him. Across from him sat Nezu, All Might now in a skeletal, deflated form that was a shock to witness. Though Naruto's expression remained unreadable and a heavily bandaged but conscious Shota Aizawa, his eyes burning with a tired intensity from within a cocoon of white gauze. Other teachers, including Present Mike and the sultry, dark-haired Midnight, stood along the walls, a silent, intimidating jury. Your name, Nezu began, his voice still pleasant. Naruto Uzumaki. And your quirk. Naruto took a slow sip of the tea. It was bland. I don't have one. Aizawa let out a dry, rasping scoff. Don't play games. I used my erasure on you when you first engaged the Nomu. It had no effect. No quirk in existence is immune to it. I told you, Naruto said, meeting his gaze without flinching. It's not a quirk. It's chakra. Present Mike leaned forward. Chakra. Like new age energy stuff. You expect us to believe you took out that monster with good vibes. The energy I use is my own, Naruto explained, choosing his words carefully. He was a shinobi. Information was a weapon, and he would not hand it over freely. I can mold it, release it. I can use it to enhance my physical abilities, create duplicates of myself, or heal wounds. The red energy was something else. A power I share with another being sealed inside of me. The room went dead silent. Sealed inside him, All Might, in his true form as Toshinori Yagi, felt a chill crawl up his spine. It sounded disturbingly similar to his own relationship with One for All, a power passed down, a legacy held within. But this boy spoke of it as if he were a living prison. Nezu's beady eyes blinked slowly. He wasn't dismissing it, he was processing it, his hyper-intelligent brain running through a million possibilities. This chakra, is it common where you are from? It is the foundation of our world's power, Naruto answered honestly. We are shinobi. Midnight spoke up, her voice losing its usual seductive purr. Shinobi, you mean like ancient assassins? Feudal Japan, something like that, Naruto conceded. He wasn't about to explain the complexities of the 5 great shinobi nations, the tailed beasts, or the 4th great ninja war to these people. They had no frame of reference. It would sound like the ravings of a lunatic. You appeared out of thin air in the middle of the USJ, Aizawa pressed, his voice raspy. How? I don't know, Naruto admitted, a flicker of frustration crossing his face for the first time. I was on a mission. There was a distortion, a tear in space. When I came to, I was here. Nezu steepled his paws. I see. An interdimensional, or perhaps translocational, event. Fascinating. He looked at Naruto, his gaze analytical. You acted decisively to protect my students. Your methods were brutal, but effective. You prioritized their safety above all else. That is the core of a hero's spirit. But his lack of restraint is a problem, Aizawa countered. He didn't just defeat that Nomu, he obliterated it. That kind of power, unchecked, is a threat. Toshinori sighed, a rattling sound in his thin chest. He saved you, Shota. He saved all of them. Let's not forget that. He turned his sunken eyes to Naruto. What do you want, young man? What is your goal here, in our world? Naruto looked down at his hands. He thought of the village he had fought and bled for. He thought of his friends, his comrades, his dream of becoming Hokage. It all felt like a lifetime away, a world he might never see again. What was his goal now? I want to understand this place, he said, his voice quiet but firm. And I want to protect people. That's the only thing I've ever been good at. Nezu's smile returned, wider this time. It held a gleam of triumph. An admirable goal. However, as Mr. Aizawa pointed out, your methods are not compatible with our society's laws. A person with your power, acting as an unsanctioned vigilante, would be hunted down by heroes and authorities alike. You would be seen as a villain. Naruto's jaw tightened. I am not a villain. I believe you, Nezu said smoothly. Which is why I have a proposition for you. One that will allow you to learn our ways, to understand what it means to be a hero in this world, all while allowing us to keep an eye on you. The principal leaned forward, his black eyes twinkling with strategic genius. Naruto Uzumaki, how would you like to enroll as a student at UA High School? The atmosphere in the Class 1A dormitory common room was a mixture of residual fear, buzzing excitement, and utter confusion. News had spread that Mr. Aizawa was in stable condition, thanks in large part to the mysterious stranger's intervention. Now, huddled on couches and chairs, the class could only talk about one thing. Or rather, one person. Did you guys see the way he moved? Mina Ishido exclaimed, bouncing on the sofa cushions. It was like, whoosh. And bam. The villains just went down. He was so cool. He was terrifying, is what he was, Kyokujiro countered, fiddling with one of her earphone jacks. She leaned back against the arm of the couch. Her expression thoughtful. Pro-heroes don't fight like that. He wasn't trying to capture them, he was trying to break them. The way he hit that first guy, I heard the bones snap from across the plaza. But he was protecting us, hero, Tsuyu Asui added, her finger on her chin. He stepped in to save me and Mineta without even thinking about it. That seems pretty heroic to me. Ochako Uraraka hugged a cushion to her chest, her cheeks still faintly pink. He asked if I was all right. The memory was vivid, the calm in his voice, the utter confidence in his stance as he faced down an army of villains. He hadn't just been powerful, he'd been reassuring. He had felt like a shield, an unbreakable wall that had appeared just for her. He saved Mr. Aizawa's life. Whatever his methods are, he's a good person. I can feel it. Momo Yaoyorozu, sitting primly in an armchair with a cup of tea of her own, nodded in agreement, though her reasons were more analytical. His abilities defy all logic. It's not a single quirk, or even a combination of quirks. Healing, superhuman strength and speed, creating solid clones, that energy projection, it's like he has a dozen quirks. None of which registered to Mr. Aizawa's erasure. It's impossible. She looked up, her dark eyes filled with a mixture of academic curiosity and genuine awe. And his combat acumen was extraordinary. He assessed every threat, prioritized targets, and neutralized them with maximum efficiency. He didn't waste a single movement. He fought like someone who has been in 100 battles. Toru Hagakure, her invisible form evident only by her floating pajamas, clapped her hands together. And he's totally handsome. Those whisker marks are so unique. Did you see his eyes? The conversation devolved into a more flustered, excited chatter about his appearance, but for a few of them, the impression was deeper. For Ochako, it was a burgeoning admiration for his protective spirit. For Momo, it was a deep respect for his impossible skill and intellect. And for Kyoka, it was a confusing mix of fear and fascination. He was a dangerous, walking contradiction, and she found herself wanting to understand him more than anything. Naruto stood by the large panoramic window in Nezu's office, looking down at the sprawling UA campus. Students were walking between buildings, laughing, talking. It was peaceful. It was so achingly familiar to the days in Konoha after the war, a peace he had nearly given his life to achieve. Behind him, Nezu had dismissed the others. It was just the two of them now. The offer is genuine, Nezu said. We will provide you with lodging, food, and an education. In return, you will abide by our rules. You will learn what it means to use your power within the confines of our society. You will learn to be a hero. And you get to watch me, Naruto finished, not turning around. He wasn't naive. This was a gilded cage, a way to keep him contained until they could understand him. Of course, Nezu replied without a hint of shame. A being of your power appearing from nowhere is a matter of global security. It would be irresponsible of me not to watch you. But I am also betting on your character. The one you displayed at the USJ. The one that chose to protect, not to conquer. Naruto closed his eyes. He could feel it again, just for a second. A faint, almost imperceptible hum in the fabric of the world. It was a trace of the same malevolent energy that had torn him from his dimension. It was vast, divine, and utterly alien. It was the energy of an Otsutsuki. The thought sent a jolt of ice through his veins. Had one of them been responsible for this? Had they followed him here? If so, this world, with its relative peace and costumed heroes, was in more danger than it could possibly imagine. He looked back down at the students. They were children, training to face threats they barely understood. They were unprepared for the kind of existential dangers he had faced. They needed to be stronger. His decision crystallized. This wasn't just about him finding his place. It was about preparing this world for what might be coming. Nezu's offer wasn't a cage. It was an opportunity, a base of operations, a place to train, to learn, and to prepare for a war these people didn't even know was on their horizon. He turned from the window, his blue eyes clear and resolved. He met the principal's intelligent gaze. All right, rat bear dog thing, Naruto said, a ghost of his old, cocky grin touching his lips for the first time. You've got yourself a new student. But I'm not here to learn how to be a hero. Nezu's whiskers twitched. Oh, I'm here to teach you all what it means to be a survivor. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Weight of Power. The classroom door slid open with a definitive thump, silencing the low buzz of morning chatter. Shota Aizawa stood there, looking more like a mummy than a teacher. Bandages covered most of his face and arms, and he moved with a stiff, deliberate gait, but his eyes, visible through narrow slits in the gauze, were as sharp and weary as ever. The class, still shaken from the USJ incident just a day prior, straightened up in their seats. Morning, he grumbled, his voice muffled. Don't think for a second that a little villain attack is enough to derail your education. The UA Sports Festival is coming up. The world will be watching. You need to be ready. A wave of excitement rippled through the room. The sports festival was the biggest hero event of the year, a chance for students to showcase their abilities to pro heroes and the entire nation. But first, Aizawa continued, his gaze sweeping over them, we have a new student. The statement landed like a stone, instantly quelling the excitement. A new student. Now, before anyone could voice their confusion, a figure stepped into the room from behind Aizawa. It was him, the stranger from the USJ. The one who had moved like the wind and fought like a demon. He wore the standard UA male uniform, a gray blazer over a white shirt and dark pants, but it looked alien on him. It was too formal, too restrictive for someone they had seen tear a monster apart with his bare hands. His blonde hair was as wild as they remembered, and his blue eyes, calm and observant, took in the room, pausing for a fraction of a second on each of them. Ochako Uraraka felt her breath catch. Seeing him here, in the mundane setting of their classroom, was a surreal experience. He wasn't a mythical savior anymore. He was a person, a boy their age, about to sit in one of these very desks. Momo Yaoyorozu's back straightened, her mind racing. Nezu had done it. He had somehow contained this force of nature, brought him into the fold. It was a brilliant and terrifyingly risky move. This is Naruto Uzumaki, Aizawa said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Due to special circumstances, he has been enrolled in the hero course. He will be your classmate. Don't give him any trouble. He gestured to the only empty seat, the one directly behind Bakugo and next to Momo. Uzumaki, take a seat. Try not to break anything. Naruto gave a slight nod, his expression unreadable. He walked down the aisle with a quiet, balanced grace that was at odds with the clatter and shuffle of a normal high school student. As he passed Katsuki Bakugo, the explosive blonde grit his teeth. A low growl rumbling in his chest. He could still feel the phantom pressure of the stranger's power from the USJ. It was a humiliating reminder that someone else had solved the problem he was meant to blow away. Naruto didn't even glance at him. He slid into his seat, his presence immediately changing the dynamic of the room. It was like a loaded weapon had just been placed on a table. The students around him, Momo, Jiro, even Todoroki, who sat impassively a row over, could feel the coiled energy he held in reserve. Right, Aizawa grumbled, turning to the chalkboard. Homeroom is over. Your next class is Hero Basic Training. All Might is leading it today. Get into your PE uniforms and meet me at Ground Beta. He turned and shuffled out of the room, leaving a stunned and whispering class in his wake. Ground Beta's vast training field baked under the midday sun. Class 1A stood assembled in their blue UA tracksuits, a nervous energy crackling among them. Naruto stood slightly apart from the group, stretching his arms over his head. The uniform was comfortable enough, but he missed the familiar weight of his flak jacket and the pouches that held his Kanaian scrolls. I am here. All Might boomed, landing in a classic superhero pose that kicked up a cloud of dust. And I am here to conduct a very special assessment. His gaze, full of theatrical bravado, landed on Naruto. The tension in the air ratcheted up a notch. Young Uzumaki here comes to us with a unique set of skills, All Might announced, his smile unwavering. To better understand his abilities and to give you all a benchmark for the coming sports festival, we will be conducting a quirk assessment test. The class murmured. They had done this on the first day of school. It was a series of physical tests designed to measure the practical application of their quirks. This will be a chance for all of you to see where you stand. All Might declared, and to see the standard you must strive to overcome. First up was the 50-meter dash. Tenya Iida, with the engines in his calves, went first, clocking in at a blistering 3.04 seconds. Tsuyu Asui used her frog-like legs to get a respectable 5.58. Ochako touched her clothes to make herself lighter, finishing in 7.15. Then it was Naruto's turn, paired against Bakugo. Bakugo grinned, a feral, competitive fire in his eyes. Get ready to eat my dust, weird whiskers. He crouched, his palms already starting to smoke. Naruto simply stood at the starting line, his posture relaxed. All Might blew the whistle. Boom. Bakugo propelled himself forward with a massive explosion. A streak of smoke and rage. He crossed the finish line in 4.13 seconds, a fantastic time. He turned, a triumphant sneer on his face, ready to gloat. But Naruto was already there. He hadn't run. He hadn't even blurred. The moment the whistle blew, he had simply vanished from the starting line and appeared at the finish, a single leaf falling from his shoulder as a sign of his passage. There was no sound, no shockwave, just a subtle displacement of air. The electronic timer next to him read 0.02 seconds. The entire class stared, mouths agape. Even All Might's smile flickered. That wasn't speed. That was teleportation. What the hell was that? Bakugo roared, his fists crackling. You cheated. You used some kind of warping quirk. It's called a body flicker, Naruto said calmly, ignoring the accusation. A basic movement technique. A basic technique. Jiro felt a shiver run down her spine. If that was basic, what was advanced? Next was the grip strength test. Shoji, with his multiple muscular arms, set the record at 540 kilograms. Naruto stepped up to the machine, took the handle, and gave it a casual squeeze. Crunch. The sound of tortured metal filled the air. The digital display flashed erratically before going dark, and the handle in Naruto's hand was twisted into a pretzel of scrap. He looked at the broken device, then at his hand, a flicker of genuine surprise on his face. "Ah," he said, a faint blush dusting his cheeks. "Sorry, I guess I don't know my own strength." He wasn't bragging. He looked genuinely apologetic. That, more than the feat itself, was what stunned Ochako. He possessed this incredible, world-breaking power, but he was embarrassed by it. It was endearing. The tests continued. Long jump, side steps, each one saw Naruto perform with an effortless, almost casual superiority that was both awe-inspiring and deeply frustrating for his competitive classmates. He wasn't even trying. He was just existing at a level so far beyond them it was like a different species. Finally, it was the ball throw. Ochako went first, using her zero gravity to get an infinity score, which impressed All Might. Then, it was Bakugo's turn. He stepped into the circle, a manic grin spreading across his face. This was his specialty. This was pure, destructive power. He wound his arm back, his palm glowing. "Die!" he screamed, unleashing a titanic explosion that propelled the softball like a cannonball. The ball soared, leaving a smoke trail in its wake. All Might held up the device. 705.2 meters. Excellent, young Bakugo. Bakugo stood panting, his chest puffed out with pride. He shot a smug glare at Naruto. "Try and beat that, you damn extra." Naruto walked into the circle, picking up the last softball. He looked at it, then out at the horizon. He could feel their eyes on him. The students, the teacher. He could also feel something else, a faint, almost non-existent tremor in the world. The same alien energy, an echo of Kagaya. It was a chilling reminder of why he was really here, why he needed to understand the limits of his own power in this new reality. This wasn't just a test. It was a calibration. He held the ball in his right hand. He didn't wind up. He didn't even brace himself. He just brought his hand forward, and in his palm, a sphere of swirling blue energy materialized with a high-pitched, whirring shriek. A perfect, miniature typhoon of pure chakra. A Rasengan. He didn't yell. He didn't make a show of it. He just gently tapped the softball with the swirling sphere. The ball didn't fly. It vanished. What followed was a sonic boom that cracked the ground in the circle and sent a shockwave rippling through the air, forcing the students to brace themselves. A thin, white vapor trail shot straight up into the sky, disappearing into the blue haze of the upper atmosphere. A full second later, a tiny, glittering speck re-entered the sky, trailing fire like a meteorite, before arcing down far beyond the horizon. Everyone was silent. The only sound was the lingering hum of the Rasengan in Naruto's hand before he let it dissipate. All Might stared at the measuring device in his hand. The screen was blank. After a moment, a single, glowing symbol appeared on it. Infinity. He didn't even throw it, Kaminari stammered, his eyes wide. He used that spinning ball of energy to propel it, Momo whispered, her mind struggling to comprehend the physics involved. The transfer of kinetic force was on a scale that defied reason. It wasn't a quirk. It was a law of nature being rewritten. Bakugo was shaking, not with rage, but with a kind of incandescent fury that was so profound it left him speechless. The casual, effortless way Naruto had just shattered his best effort wasn't just a defeat, it was a statement. It said, "You and I are not in the same league. We are not even playing the same sport. You." Bakugo finally roared, his hands starting to emit small explosions. What the hell was that? "Fight me, right here, right now." He lunged, but he never made it. A gray capture weapon whipped out, wrapping around him and neutralizing his quirk. Aizawa, who had been observing from the sidelines, stood with his hair floating and his eye glowing red. "That's enough." Aizawa's tired voice cut through the tension. "Bakugo, stand down. The assessment is over." "He's mocking me," Bakugo snarled, struggling against the bindings. "No," Naruto said, his voice cutting through the rage. He turned to face Bakugo, and for the first time, his blue eyes held a flicker of something other than calm. It was a deep, ancient sadness. "I'm not mocking you. I'm showing you the difference in our worlds. The power you use to compete, the power I use, was forged to survive. The weight of that statement settled over the class. This wasn't about being the best. For him, power was a tool for survival. What kind of world had he come from where a technique like that was necessary to live? Later, in the boys' locker room, the mood was subdued. Naruto changed quickly and quietly, ignoring the furtive glances and hushed whispers. He could feel Bakugo's hateful glare burning into his back, and the silent, analytical gaze of Todoroki from across the room. He was an anomaly, an outsider, and they didn't know what to make of him. He was heading for the door when a few of them finally broke the silence. "Hey, Uzumaki," a red-haired boy with sharp teeth, Kirishima, called out. He had a wide, friendly grin. "That was seriously manly back there. I've never seen anything like it." Naruto paused, turning back. "Yeah, dude, that was insane," Kaminari added, slinging an arm over Kirishima's shoulder. "Where'd you learn to do that stuff?" Before Naruto could answer, he saw a group of the girls waiting in the hallway just outside the door. Ochako was at the front, twisting her fingers together nervously. Mina was right beside her, practically bouncing with excitement, with Tsuyu and Toru hovering just behind. He walked out, and Ochako met his gaze, her cheeks turning a little red. Uzumaki-san," she started, giving a small bow. We wanted to thank you again. For what you did at the USJ. And, wow, that ball throw was amazing." Mina leaned in, her pink face alight with curiosity. "Are you really from another world? Do you have, like, fox ears under all that hair? Can you teach me how to do that clone thing?" Quote. Naruto looked at their eager, curious faces. They weren't afraid of him. They weren't challenging him. They were just interested. After a life of being feared, as a Jinchuriki or revered as a war hero, this simple, genuine curiosity was disarming. For the first time since he'd arrived in this strange, new world, a real, unforced smile spread across Naruto's face. It was a warm, bright smile that reached his eyes, chasing away the shadows of the soldier and revealing the boy underneath. "It's just Naruto," he said. "And it's a long story." Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. Echoes and Declarations. The days leading up to the sports festival settled into a strange new rhythm. For Naruto, UA was a paradox. The academic subjects, mathematics, literature, and English taught with excruciating enthusiasm by Present Mike were a baffling ordeal. His formal education had been sporadic at best, consisting mostly of mission reports and bingo books. He spent his evenings in the library, not studying, but devouring books on history, physics, and social studies, trying to build a framework for this bizarre, quirk-driven world. But in the heroics classes, the roles were reversed. During rescue training in the unforeseen simulation joint, now fully repaired, Naruto moved with an instinctual efficiency that left his classmates struggling to keep up. While they were still processing the scenario, he would have already created a dozen shadow clones to perform search and rescue, another team to secure the perimeter, and a third to triage the wounded with rudimentary medical jutsu. He didn't see it as a test. He saw it as a mission, and the muscle memory of 1,000 battles took over. This duality made him an enigma. He was the dunce of the classroom and the god of the training field. This schism was most apparent in the cafeteria. He would sit alone at a corner table, methodically working his way through a massive bowl of ramen he'd cajoled the hero lunch rush into making, while the rest of the class watched him with a mixture of awe, fear, and burgeoning curiosity. The boys, for the most part, kept their distance. Kirishima and Kaminari would offer friendly nods. But Bakugo's simmering resentment was a palpable force field, and Todoroki's cold observation felt like a constant, silent judgment. It was the girls who finally breached his isolation. It started with Ochako. She approached his table, a tray with a simple bowl of rice in her hands, her expression a mix of nervousness and determination. "Is this seat taken?" she asked, gesturing to the chair opposite him. Naruto looked up from his noodles, surprised. "No." She sat down, her movements a little too quick. I see you sitting alone all the time. I figured you might want some company." Before Naruto could formulate a response, he was flanked. Mina Ishido slid onto the bench next to him with a cheerful, scoot-over, whisker face, while Tsuyu Asui took the seat next to Ochako, offering a quiet, "Hello. Naruto-chan, Hiro. Within a minute, his table was full. Momo Yaoyorozu sat down gracefully, followed by a hesitant Kyoka Jiro who seemed to be dragged along by an invisible Toru Hagakure. So, Mina began, leaning in close, her black and yellow eyes sparkling with mischief. The sports festival is in a week. You gonna use that crazy blue energy ball thingy to just, blow up the whole stadium. Naruto swallowed a mouthful of noodles. It's called a Rasengan. And no, that would be inefficient. Momo leaned forward, her brow furrowed in concentration. That's what I find so fascinating. Your chakra seems to be an internalized energy source, completely separate from the biological manifestation of a quirk. Is it finite? Does it regenerate like stamina? Or is it a reservoir you have to replenish? It's both, Naruto answered, finding himself surprisingly willing to engage. Everyone in my world has chakra, but most can't use it. Mine is larger than average, and it replenishes as I rest. He paused, then added, the red energy is different. That belongs to a friend. Jiro stopped pretending not to listen. A friend. That destructive, terrifying power belonged to a friend. Some friend, she muttered under her breath, just loud enough for Naruto's enhanced senses to pick up. He turned his gaze to her, his blue eyes surprisingly gentle. He's grumpy, and he's caused me a lot of trouble. But he's saved my life more times than I can count. We understand each other. There was a depth to his words, a history of pain and partnership that silenced them. They were talking about quirks and tests, but he was talking about a bond forged in fire. Ochako decided to change the subject back to safer territory. Well, whatever it is, it's incredible. Everyone's talking about you. They're all excited to see what you'll do in the festival. Her voice was full of genuine admiration, and it made something in Naruto's chest feel warm. Everyone wants to beat you, is what she means. Jiro clarified, poking at her food with a fork. Especially Bakugo. He can try, Naruto said, his tone neutral. It wasn't a boast, it was a simple statement of fact, devoid of malice or arrogance. Which somehow made it even more intimidating. Their conversation was cut short by a sudden drop in temperature. A shadow fell over their table. Shoto Todoroki stood there, his heterochromatic eyes fixed solely on Naruto. His presence was a stark contrast to Bakugo's explosive rage. It was a cold, oppressive weight, a glacier of controlled power and immense pressure. The noisy cafeteria seemed to fade into the background. Uzumaki, Todoroki said, his voice a low monotone. I was created for a single purpose, to surpass all might. My entire life has been a fully curated training regimen to produce a power that can eclipse the number one hero. The girls at the table exchanged uneasy glances. This was far more intense than a simple school rivalry. I have rejected the man who created me. Todoroki continued, his gaze unwavering. I will achieve his ambition, but I will do it using only my mother's power. I will win the festival without ever using my left side. He looked at Naruto's hand. The one that had held the Rasengan. You, however, are an obstacle I did not anticipate. Your power is absolute. It is the perfect test. When I defeat you in the final round, using only my ice, I will have proven that I don't need his power to be the strongest. I will have destroyed his entire reason for being. It was a declaration of war. Not one born of anger, like Bakugo's, but of cold, hard conviction. He wasn't just challenging Naruto to a fight, he was making Naruto a tool for his own patricidal rebellion. Naruto finished his broth, setting the bowl down with a quiet click. He looked up at Todoroki, and his eyes were not those of a rival, but of someone who recognized a familiar pain. He saw the anger, the self-imposed limitations, the burden. Desire to prove something to a world that had hurt him. He saw a mirror of his own lonely childhood. Your father sounds like a real asshole, Naruto said simply. The bluntness of the statement caught Todoroki off guard. But if you go into a fight using only half your strength, you're not just disrespecting him. You're disrespecting your opponent. He stood up, his presence suddenly matching Todoroki's intensity. Don't come at me with half measures. If you want to prove you're the strongest, then use everything you've got. Otherwise, don't waste my time. He turned and walked away, leaving a stunned Todoroki in a silent, wide-eyed table of girls in his wake. Later that evening, Naruto bypassed the newly assigned dorms, Nezu's, gilded cage, and made his way to the roof of the main school building. The city sprawled out before him, a sea of glittering lights under a purple twilight sky. It was beautiful, but it wasn't home. The loneliness was a physical ache, a constant companion since his arrival. He closed his eyes, extending his senses. It was a technique he'd mastered during the war, the ability to feel the life force, the chakra, of everything around him. He could feel the students in the dorms, the teachers on patrol, the ordinary citizens in their homes. It was a sea of unfamiliar energies. Then he felt it. It was the same malevolent hum he'd felt before, the echo of Otsutsuki energy. But this time, it was stronger, more focused. It wasn't just a residual trace, it was an active presence. It felt like a pair of eyes watching him from an impossible distance, from a place beyond the sky. The feeling was cold, ancient, and possessive. It felt like Kagaya's chakra, but twisted, warped into something even more alien. "It's here, Kurama," Naruto thought, his body tensing. "I feel it." The fox's voice rumbled in his mind, stripped of its usual bravado. "This is not an echo, Kit. This is a scout. Something followed you through the tear." Naruto's fists clenched. His personal problem had just become this world's impending doom. These heroes, with their flashy quirks and televised battles, were children playing with firecrackers, oblivious to the supernova that was staring down at them. He opened his eyes, the weight of a war only he knew was coming settling on his shoulders. He was alone, stranded, and facing a divine threat in a world unprepared for it. Thinking about jumping, the voice startled him. He turned to see Ochako Uraraka standing by the rooftop access door, a worried expression on her face. She was holding 2 cans of soda. "I saw you come up here," she said, walking over cautiously. "You looked troubled. After what Todoroki said, I thought you might want someone to talk to." She held out one of the cans. "It's just orange soda, not ramen, I know, but..." He took the can, his fingers brushing against hers. The simple, human contact was grounding. "Thanks," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. They stood in silence for a moment, sipping their drinks and looking out at the city. "You know," Ochako said softly, "I became a hero for a pretty selfish reason. My parents own a construction company, but business has been bad. I want to become a pro so I can make a lot of money and give them an easy life." She laughed, a self-deprecating sound. "It's not as noble as what Todoroki said, or Iida wanting to uphold his family's legacy. It's kind of embarrassing." Naruto looked at her. Her round face was earnest, her brown eyes full of a light he hadn't seen in a long time. It was hope. "Wanting to help your family isn't embarrassing," he said. "It's the most noble reason there is. The people you love, they're the reason you fight. They're what makes you strong." He thought of Iruka-sensei, of Kakashi, of Granny Tsunade, of his parents. They were the source of his power, more than any tailed beast. Ochako's cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. "You really believe that, don't you?" "It's all I've ever known," he admitted. She took a deep breath. "Well, for what it's worth, even if you're not from here, and even if you've got the weight of whatever world's on your shoulders, I'm glad you're here, Naruto. And I'll be cheering for you at the festival." Quote. Her smile was genuine, a small beacon in the overwhelming darkness of his new reality. For the first time, he felt a flicker of something other than duty or loneliness. He felt a connection, a bond, fragile and new, being forged right here on a rooftop, a million miles from home. "Thank you, Ochako," he said, and the name felt right on his tongue. He gave her a small, grateful smile of his own. "I'll try to put on a good show." Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Hurricane Stage. The roar was a physical thing. It was a wave of sound that vibrated in Naruto's bones, a colossal, faceless entity made of 100,000 screaming voices. He stood in the waiting tunnel, the concrete cool against his back, listening to Present Mike whip the crowd into a frenzy. In the elemental nations, a gathering this large usually meant one of 2 things: a cage's address or the start of a war. Here, it was for sport. It was a festival celebrating the very power that, in his world, had been the cause of so much bloodshed. The sheer, unadulterated joy of it all was bizarre and strangely infectious. The Class 1A waiting room had been a hive of nervous energy. Iida, was chopping the air with rigid hand gestures. Midoriya was muttering a million strategies under his breath, and Bakugo looked like a bomb that had decided to shorten its own fuse. Naruto had simply sat on a bench, performing maintenance on a handful of kunai he'd requested from the support department. They were standard issue steel, nothing like his custom-forged blades back home, but they had the right weight and feel. They were a small piece of familiarity in this alien world. Nervous, he looked up to see Momo Yaoyorozu standing before him, her usual poise betrayed by the way she was smoothing down the front of her PE uniform. "No," he answered honestly. "Just loud. Tell me about it." Kyoka Jiro grumbled from nearby, her jacks unplugged and tucked into her pockets. "It's like listening to a hurricane in a shoebox. I think it's exciting." Mina Ishido bounced on the balls of her feet, a wide grin on her face. "The whole country is watching us. This is our big debut. Try not to get eliminated in the first round." Then, Jiro deadpanned, earning a playful shove from the pink-skinned girl. Ochako approached Naruto's bench, her face set with a determined expression he was beginning to recognize. It was the same look she'd had on the roof. "Let's all do our best, Naruto-kun," she said, her voice full of a bright, earnest energy that was impossible to ignore. He found himself mirroring her smile. "Yeah, let's." Quote. Now, standing in the tunnel, he could hear Midnight's voice calling for the student representative. Bakugo shouldered his way past, ascending the stage to give a pledge that was less of a promise and more of a threat to the entire student body, declaring he would be number one. It was so arrogant, so utterly Bakugo, that Naruto almost laughed. Then came the announcement of the first event, a 4-kilometer obstacle race around the entire stadium. A mad, chaotic dash for the finish. Naruto watched as his classmates jostled for position at the starting line, their bodies tense, quirks humming just under their skin. He hung back, content to start near the rear. In a race like this, the start wasn't what mattered. It was the choke points. The buzzer screamed. The tunnel became a bottleneck of bodies and quirks. A wave of ice shot forward, coating the ground and trapping half the competitors from other classes. Todoroki. A smart, brutal opening move. He sprinted ahead onto the frozen ground. His expression impassive. Bakugo used his explosions to fly over the trapped masses, screaming insults as he went. Naruto didn't bother with the ice. He simply ran up the wall of the tunnel, his feet sticking to the concrete with a subtle application of chakra, and sprinted along the ceiling over the heads of the struggling students below before dropping back to the ground, easily clearing the first trap. Then came the first true obstacle, the Robo Inferno. A line of the 0-point robots from the entrance exam, massive behemoths that towered over the track, blocked their path. Todoroki, in a breathtaking display of power, sent a colossal glacier of ice erupting from the ground, freezing several of the robots in an awkward, off-balance state. He ran straight through the opening he'd created, not sparing a glance for the unstable titans he'd left behind. "He made a path for us," someone yelled. "Don't be an idiot," Bakugo roared as he flew past. He froze them off balance. "They're gonna fall." As if on cue, the frozen machines began to creak and groan, toppling towards the students below. Naruto didn't hesitate. He formed a single hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. In a series of smokeless puffs, 20 Narutos appeared. "Aim for the joints," he commanded. The clones scattered, leaping onto the falling robots. They moved with a purpose that was terrifyingly non-human, running up metal limbs, their hands glowing with chakra. They didn't punch. They didn't break. They used precise, targeted strikes, a Rasengan to a main hydraulic in a leg, a chakra-infused kick to shatter a crucial servo in a shoulder. They dismantled the threat, ensuring the robots collapsed inward on themselves rather than onto the other racers. The real Naruto didn't even slow down, sprinting through the carnage his clones had managed. The crowd, which had gasped in terror at the falling robots, was now roaring in stunned appreciation. Pro-heroes in the commentary box were shouting over each other, trying and failing to analyze his quirk. The next obstacle was the fall, a deep canyon with pillars of rock connected by a series of tightropes. For most students, it was a test of balance and ingenuity. For Naruto, it was a Tuesday. He ran across the first rope, his balance perfect, his speed barely diminished. It was easier than running across tree branches. He was catching up to the leaders. Todoroki and Bakugo, who were now locked in their own private war, explosions meeting ice slides in a spectacular display. They were so focused on each other they didn't even notice him until he was right behind them. The final obstacle was a minefield. The ground was littered with pressure-activated explosives, powerful enough to send a person flying but not to cause serious injury. Bakugo flew over it. Todoroki was building a careful path of ice. Naruto grinned. This was his kind of chaos. He stopped at the edge of the minefield and created another 100 clones. "All right, guys," he yelled to himself. "Let's clear a path." The clones let out a collective battle cry and charged. What followed was pandemonium. Explosions ripped through the air, sending plumes of pink smoke and dirt everywhere. The clones were being blasted sky high, their bodies disappearing in puffs of smoke. It was a chaotic, suicidal charge that served a brilliant purpose. It created a smokescreen, sowed confusion, and, most importantly, cleared patches of the field. "What is that idiot doing?" Bakugo screamed from the air, watching the madness unfold. Through the smoke and explosions, the real Naruto sprinted. He used the blasts to propel him, leaping from one crater to the next. He grabbed one of his own clones mid-air as it was launched by a mine and, with a powerful spin, threw it down onto another mine. The resulting explosion acted as a springboard, launching Naruto up and over the last stretch of the field. He landed in a perfect roll, sprinting the last 100 meters and crossing the finish line in first place, not even out of breath. He turned and gave a wide, sunny wave to the stadium, which erupted in a deafening ovation. A cavalry battle. The remaining 42 students stared at the board. For the second event, they were to form teams of 2 to 4, with point values assigned based on their ranking in the race. The catch: the first place finisher was worth 10 million points. Every eye in the arena landed on Naruto. He was no longer a classmate. He was a prize. A walking, breathing, 10 million point target. "Now then," Midnight purred, cracking her whip. "You have 15 minutes to form your teams. Begin." Instantly, the students began to cluster up, forming alliances. And just as instantly, they began to avoid Naruto. He was the ultimate high-risk, high-reward partner. Teaming with him meant surviving an onslaught from the entire field. No one was willing to take that bet. Naruto watched them, a familiar feeling of isolation settling in his gut. Fine. If no one wanted to team up with the future Hokage, he'd just have to win this thing by himself. 1,000 shadow clones ought to do the trick. "I'll team up with you." He turned. Ochako Uraraka stood there, her face flushed but her eyes shining with unwavering resolve. "It's better to team up with someone you like, right?" she said, offering him a brilliant, heartfelt smile. Naruto was floored. After that display, after seeing the impossible target on his back, she had still chosen him. Before he could even respond, they were joined by others. "Her logic is sound," Momo Yaoyorozu said, stepping forward. "Strategically, your overwhelming power makes you the most valuable asset, despite the high risk. I can use my creation quirk to provide defensive and support items. I would be honored to join your team." Quote, "Sounds like a party." Mina Ishido chimed in, slinging an arm around Ochako. "Defending against the whole class. That sounds way more fun than chasing some low-point chumps. If Ochako-chan and Mina-chan are in, then I am too." "Hero," Tsuyu Asui added, her calm presence a welcome anchor. "We should have a balanced team." Naruto looked at the 4 girls who had gathered around him. A gravity manipulator, a living factory, an acid user, and a frog. And him. It was the strangest shinobi squad he'd ever been a part of. He couldn't stop the wide, genuine grin that spread across his face. "All right," he said, his voice filled with a newfound confidence. "Let's show them what we can do." He would be the horse, the foundation. Ochako would be the rider, Dyer. CTing them and holding the 10 million point headband. Momo, Mina, and Tsuyu would be his left and right guards. As the buzzer sounded, Naruto crouched, the girls climbing onto his back and shoulders with practiced ease. "Ochako," he said, looking up at her. "Make me light." She tapped him on the shoulder. "My pleasure." The effect was instantaneous. Naruto felt his weight vanish. Combined with his own chakra-enhanced strength, He was now faster and more agile than anything on the field. The battle began, and as predicted, it was a chaotic free-for-all with Team Uzumaki as the epicenter. "I'll kill you, Deku, and take your points," Bakugo screamed, his team blasting towards them. "Bakugo, you idiot, the target is Uzumaki," Jiro yelled from his team. Todoroki's team advanced with terrifying precision, leaving a trail of ice in their wake, trapping other teams as they focused solely on Naruto. "Momo, now," Ochako commanded from her perch. On it, Momo's hands began to glow, and she produced a thick, insulated blanket, which she threw over them just as Todoroki unleashed a wave of frost. The ice sheeted over the blanket instead of freezing them solid. "Mina, you got it." Mina sprayed a slick of acid behind them, causing Bakugo's charging team to slip and slide, their advance momentarily broken. Naruto moved like a phantom. He dodged, weaved, and leapt, his movements so fast and erratic that most teams couldn't even get close. Tsuyu's long tongue would occasionally shoot out, snatching a low-point headband from a distracted team, adding to their score as a bonus. They were a surprisingly effective unit. Ochako was a natural commander, her directions clear and concise. Momo's creations were endlessly versatile, and Mina and Tsuyu were perfect for crowd control. It was the most fun Naruto had had in a fight in years. Finally, Todoroki cornered them. A massive wall of ice erupted, boxing them in. "It's over," he stated, his voice cold. "Not yet," Naruto growled. A faint, red aura, visible only for a split second, flared around him. It wasn't an attack, just a pulse of raw, immense heat. The ice wall hissed, melting into steam and water. Todoroki's eyes widened in shock. That heat, it was even more intense than his father's flames. And it came from the same person who had used that impossible, cold blue energy. In the last 30 seconds, chaos erupted. Bakugo, in a last-ditch effort, launched himself into the air with a massive explosion, rocketing towards them for a direct grab. "Naruto, up!" Ochako yelled. "Hold on!" he shouted back. He focused his chakra into the soles of his feet and jumped. Amplified by Ochako's quirk, the jump was colossal. He soared 30 feet into the air, clearing Bakugo's desperate lunge by a hair's breadth. The final buzzer blared. They landed, and the stadium was silent for a beat before exploding into another round of thunderous applause. They had done it. They had held on to the 10 million points and survived the onslaught. Naruto let the girls down, a wide, triumphant grin on his face. Ochako leapt off his back, her face beaming. On pure impulse, she threw her arms around him in a tight hug. "We did it! We did it!" Naruto froze, his entire body going stiff. Her arms were warm around his shoulders, her cheek pressed against his chest. He could feel her excited heartbeat. He awkwardly, hesitantly, patted her on the back. She pulled away, her face suddenly turning the color of a tomato as she realized what she'd done. "Oh, sorry, I just got excited," she stammered, floating a few inches off the ground in her embarrassment. Before he could say anything, the final event was announced on the main screen, a one-on-one tournament bracket. The names began to populate the slots. Naruto scanned the list, his eyes finding his own name. His first-round opponent was a boy from the General Studies course with a quirk that supposedly allowed him to brainwash people. An interesting challenge, but as his gaze drifted across the bracket, he saw the matchups that mattered. Bakugo, Todoroki, and his new friends, Ochako, Momo. They would all have to fight. His expression hardened. The fun and games were over. Now came the real test. Unseen, miles away in a darkened room lit only by the glow of a dozen monitors, a figure leaned forward. Its form was indistinct, but its energy, that same cold, divine chakra Naruto kept sensing, pulsed with a malevolent curiosity as it watched the replay of Naruto flaring the Nine Tails power. "So," a voice rasped, a sound like grinding stones. "A piece of the old world survived. How delightful. Let's see how much of the Jubi's power this little vessel holds before we harvest it." Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Weight of a Promise. The festival grounds buzzed with the energy of a captured lightning storm. The chaotic, sprawling events of the morning had been distilled into the pure, focused tension of the final tournament. In the stands, the students of Class 1A sat together, A knot of nerves and anticipation. They were no longer a single, cohesive unit, but a collection of individuals about to be pitted against each other. Naruto stood by the railing, looking down at the pristine fighting stage. The roar of the crowd was a distant hum. His focus was inward, sorting through the flood of information he had gathered. He had watched every competitor, noted every quirk, analyzed every fighting style. It was second nature, the ingrained habit of a shinobi preparing for battle. Uzumaki. He turned to see the tail-swinging boy from his class, Ojiro, approaching him. A few students from Class 1B were with him, their expressions grim. "My first match is against a guy from General Studies, Shinso Hitoshi," Ojiro said, his voice low. "He didn't stand out in the first two events. But I have a bad feeling. A couple of my friends from the cavalry battle, they don't remember how they lost their headbands. They just remember him talking to them." Naruto's eyes sharpened. A verbal trigger for a mental control quirk. Ojiro blinked, surprised by the immediate and accurate analysis. "Yeah, that's what we were thinking. A brainwashing quirk. I'm telling you this because, well, your first match is against him too. Be careful," one of the 1B students added. "Don't answer any of his questions. Don't even talk to him." Naruto looked at their concerned faces. They were warning him, a potential rival, out of a sense of fairness. It was a strange and honorable gesture. He gave them a small, reassuring nod. "Thanks for the warning. But don't worry, I've dealt with worse illusions than that." Quote, he thought of the Uchiha clan, of Itachi's Tsukuyomi, a genjutsu that could manipulate time and perception within the victim's mind. A simple brainwashing command was child's play by comparison. Kurama grumbled in the back of his mind, a low rumble of agreement. Let the brat try to control this mind. He'll find it's a bit crowded in here. The first match began. Izuku Midoriya vs Hitoshi Shinso. Naruto watched with a critical eye as Shinso expertly goaded Midoriya into a response, the green-haired boy's body instantly going slack, his eyes vacant. He turned and began walking numbly towards the edge of the ring. It was a potent ability, simple and absolute. Just as Midoriya was about to step out, a blast of energy, visible only to Naruto's chakra-sensitive eyes, erupted from his hand. Breaking the connection, Midoriya fought back, and with a clever throw, won the match. Naruto noted the flicker of unfamiliar chakra within Midoriya. It was chaotic, powerful, and not entirely under the boy's control. It felt layered, like multiple presences in one body. Another similarity to his own situation, yet fundamentally different. Next came Todoroki's match. He faced Zero, a boy who could shoot tape from his elbows. The match began and ended in a single, brutal instant. Before Zero could even fully deploy his quirk, Todoroki unleashed a tidal wave of ice. A glacier that consumed half the arena and froze the boy solid. The sheer, overwhelming power was terrifying. The crowd was stunned into silence before erupting into cheers for the son of the number 2 hero. Naruto watched, his expression unreadable. Todoroki hadn't just defeated his opponent, he had made a statement. It was a display of raw, unrestrained force meant for an audience of two, his father, Endeavor, who was watching from a private box, and Naruto himself. It was a promise of the power he would bring to their inevitable confrontation. Finally, it was his turn. He walked out onto the stage, the roar of the crowd washing over him. Across the ring, Shinso stood with a lazy, confident smirk, his purple hair looking almost black in the stadium's shadow. "So, Shinso Bega," and his present mic announced the start of the match, his voice dripping with condescension. "You're the famous transfer student. The monster who took down that Nomu. Must be nice, being blessed with a powerful, heroic quirk like that. Some of us have to work with what we're given, a power more suited for a villain." Naruto remained silent, his feet planted, his hands in his pockets. He watched Shinso's mouth, but his attention was on the boy's chakra, the way it flared slightly with every word, primed to lash out and ensnare his mind. Shinso's smirk widened. "Not going to talk, smart, but what about your friends? I saw them up there in the stands, cheering you on. All those pretty girls from Class 1A. Are you going to protect them when real villains show up? Or will you let them get hurt, just like you let that teacher, Aizawa, get broken at the USJ?" The bait was obvious, but it was sharp. Naruto didn't flinch. He simply took a single, deep breath. Shinso's eyes narrowed. Fine. You want to play the strong, silent type. Let's see how strong you are when you're walking out of the ring like a mindless puppet. He took a step forward, his mouth opening to deliver another volley of provocations. He never got the chance. Naruto vanished. There was no burst of speed, no sound of rushing air. One moment he was standing 30 feet away, and the next he was directly in front of Shinso, a silent, orange-clad specter. Shinso's eyes went wide with shock and a flicker of genuine fear. Before he could even process what had happened, Naruto's hand gently tapped his shoulder. With a slight push, Shinso, his mind still reeling, stumbled backward, his heel catching the edge of the ring. He teetered there for a moment before falling out onto the grass below. The stadium was utterly silent. Midnight, recovering from her own shock, raised her arm. Shinso is out of bounds. Uzumaki is the winner. The match had lasted less than 5 seconds. No flashy moves, no destructive power, just a single, silent, impossibly fast step. In the stands, his classmates were speechless. He didn't even move, Kaminari stammered. No, he moved, Momo corrected, her voice a hushed whisper. As that, body flicker, technique from the assessment test. Its speed is instantaneous. He didn't need to fight Shinso's quirk. He simply rendered it irrelevant by closing the distance before it could be used. It was a perfect tactical victory. Naruto turned and walked off the stage, ignoring the confused mixture of boos and cheers from the crowd. He had won, and he had done it his way, with overwhelming efficiency and not a single wasted move. The next several matches passed in a blur of action. Finally, the time came for the 7th match, Ochako Uraraka vs Katsuki Bakugo. Naruto found Ochako in the waiting tunnel, pacing back and forth, her face pale. She was clenching and unclenching her fists, a storm of anxiety and determination in her eyes. "Hey," he said softly. She jumped, startled, then gave him a weak, wobbly smile. "Oh, Naruto-kun, I'm up next." "I know." He walked over, stopping a few feet from her. He could see the fear she was trying so hard to hide. She was about to face a walking natural disaster. Anyone would be afraid. Good luck. Felt cheap. You can do it. Felt like a lie. He opted for the truth, for the shinobi way. "Forget his quirk," he said, his voice serious and direct. Her eyes locked onto his. Everyone sees the explosions, and they freeze up. That's his real weapon, intimidation. Don't look at his hands. Look at his shoulders, his eyes. He has a tell before he unleashes a big one. His right shoulder dips almost half an inch. Ochako stared at him, her pacing forgotten. He wasn't just encouraging her, he was giving her intel. He was treating her like a comrade in arms. "Don't wait for him to give you an opening," Naruto continued. "He won't. You have to make one. Your power is subtle. Use it. Keep him guessing. Keep him moving. And most of all," he met her gaze. His blue eyes intense. "Don't you dare give up. Make him take you seriously." A fire ignited in her chest, chasing away the fear. He believed she could do more than just participate. He believed she could fight. She straightened her shoulders, her expression hardening into one of pure resolve. "Right. Thank you, Naruto-kun. Show them what you're made of, Ochako," he said, and the use of her given name, so natural and firm, was the last piece of armor she needed. The fight was brutal. From the moment it began, Ochako was on the offensive. She charged, relentlessly, forcing Bakugo to use his explosions to keep her at bay. She stayed low, using his smoke as cover, trying to get close enough to touch him. Every time he blasted her back, she got up and charged again. The crowd began to murmur, then to boo. They saw a powerful student mercilessly blasting a seemingly helpless girl. "This is cruel," someone shouted. "Just knock her out of the ring." Naruto stood in the stands. His fists clenched so tight his knuckles were white. He ignored the booing, his gaze locked on the fight. He saw what the others didn't. Ochako wasn't attacking Bakugo. She was attacking the ground around Bakugo. Every explosion that kicked up dirt and debris, she was touching, making it float. She was creating an arsenal, high above the stadium where no one was looking. It was a brilliant, desperate, all-or-nothing strategy. "She has a plan," he muttered to himself. Momo and Iida, sitting nearby, heard him and looked up at the sky. Their eyes widened as they saw it. Hundreds of tons of rock, a makeshift meteor shower, hanging silently in the air. Finally, her moment came. With a cry of defiance, she released her quirk. The sky fell. For the first time, a look of genuine shock crossed Bakugo's face. He looked up at the rain of death plummeting towards him. But it wasn't fear, it was respect. She had pushed him. She had forced his hand. Some of you were calling me a villain, he said, a wild, almost joyful grin spreading across his face. He raised a single hand towards the sky. I'm not the one who needs to be taken seriously. He unleashed a single, cataclysmic explosion. Howitzer impact. The blast was immense, a miniature sun that vaporized every single piece of falling rock and sent a shockwave powerful enough to shake the entire stadium. When the smoke cleared, Ochako was on the ground, unconscious from the backlash. Bakugo stood over her, panting, his arms smoking. He had won, but he was no longer mocking. He had been forced to use one of his ultimate moves against the girl everyone had written off. The boos had died, replaced by a stunned, respectful silence. Naruto found her in the hallway outside the infirmary. She had been healed by Recovery Girl, but the emotional wounds remained. She was leaning against the wall, her head bowed, silent tears tracing paths through the grime on her cheeks. He didn't say anything at first. He just walked over and stood beside her, a silent, steady presence. I lost, she whispered, her voice thick with heartbreak. I even called my dad, and told him I'd win. You did lose, Naruto said, his voice soft but firm. She flinched, but he continued. You lost the match, but you made the most powerful person in our class use everything he had just to survive. You earned his respect. You earned everyone's respect. He looked down the hall, his gaze distant. The first time I fought my rival, my best friend, he broke my arm, shattered my ribs, and left me for dead. I lost so badly I couldn't even move for a week. But that loss taught me what I was missing. It showed me the gap I needed to close. It made me stronger. She looked up at him, her tear-filled brown eyes meeting his clear blue ones. He wasn't pitying her. He was empathizing with her. He was sharing a piece of his own pain to lessen hers. What you did out there today, Ochako, he said, turning to face her fully. That wasn't a loss. It was a promise. A promise of how strong you're going to be. Her tears stopped. A small, watery, but genuine smile touched her lips. Thank you, Naruto. As he stood there with her in the quiet hallway, he felt it again. A cold, piercing sensation, like being watched through a pane of frosted glass. It was the alien chakra, the Otsutsuki presence. It felt stronger now, more focused, as if the massive emotional output of the stadium had drawn its attention. It was watching him, studying him, and for the first time, he felt it wasn't just watching him. It was watching them. His expression hardened. This world's peace was more fragile than he thought. And he was standing right at the epicenter of the coming storm. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. A Tale of Two Flames. The air in the stadium had changed. The festive, boisterous energy of the early rounds had evaporated, replaced by a thick, heavy anticipation. The quarterfinal bracket had pitted the two monsters of Class 1A against each other. It was the immovable object versus the unstoppable force. Shoto Todoroki, the prodigy of ice, versus Naruto Uzumaki, the inexplicable storm. In the 1A seating area, a line had been drawn. The students weren't cheering for one over the other. They were simply bracing for the fallout. This is going to be intense, Kirishima said, leaning forward, his hands gripping the railing. Todoroki's ice is no joke, but Naruto's, well, he's Naruto. I am concerned, Iida stated, his arm chopping the air with nervous energy. Both possess power on a scale that could cause significant damage to the arena, and potentially to each other. I trust the UA faculty to intervene if necessary, but... He didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. Ochako sat silently, her hands clasped in her lap. She read the fire in Naruto's eyes when he'd told her about his own rival, the pain and strength forged in that conflict. He wasn't just fighting Todoroki, he was fighting the ghost of his own past. She found herself praying not for a victory, but for a safe conclusion. Momo watched with an analytical eye, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. Todoroki's strategy is clear. He will attempt to overwhelm Naruto with large-scale, instantaneous attacks, just as he did with Zero. He'll want to end it quickly to prevent Naruto from utilizing his unpredictable techniques. But Naruto, he is the ultimate wildcard. He won't engage on Todoroki's terms. He better not, Jiro muttered, chewing on her thumbnail. That glacier was terrifying. No one can just punch their way through that. Down in the waiting tunnel, Naruto rolled his shoulders, feeling the familiar pre-battle thrum of chakra under his skin. This wasn't about winning a school tournament. He had seen the look in Todoroki's eyes, the self-inflicted chains. The burning hatred that was freezing him from the inside out. He saw a soul at war with itself, and it was a battlefield he knew all too well. You're going to be a busybody again, aren't you? Kurama's voice was a low grumble in his mind, but there was no real malice in it. You can't just see a sad sack and leave them be. He's not a sad sack, Naruto thought back, a ghost of a smile on his face. He's an idiot, and I'm an expert at knocking sense into idiots. Present Mike's voice screamed from the speakers, announcing the combatants. The crowd roared. Naruto walked out into the blinding sunlight, his expression calm. Across the field, Todoroki emerged from the opposite tunnel, a cloud of cold vapor rolling off his right side. His heterochromatic eyes were locked on Naruto, burning with an icy fire. In the stands, the number 2 hero, Endeavor, leaned forward, his flaming beard seeming to glow with anticipation. This was it, the perfect crucible to test his masterpiece. Begin. The world turned white. Todoroki didn't waste a single moment. He stomped his foot, and a mountain of jagged ice erupted from the ground, a tidal wave of frost and fury that surged across the arena floor, intending to engulf Naruto completely. It was bigger, faster, and more vicious than the one he had used on Zero. But his target was already gone. Naruto moved in a flicker of orange, appearing atop the highest spire of the newly formed glacier. He looked down at Todoroki, his hands still in his pockets. That's a nice opening move, he called down, his voice carrying easily across the now silent stadium. You'll freeze the whole crowd if you keep that up. Is that all you've got? Todoroki scowled, his frustration a palpable thing. He stomped again, and spears of ice shot up the glacier, aiming to impale Naruto. Naruto leapt, twisting in midair, landing on another ice shard and kicking off it before it could fully form. He was using Todoroki's creation as his own personal jungle gym, his movements fluid and mocking. Hold still, Todoroki snarled, sending another, whiter wave of ice chasing after him. Naruto simply ran along the wave's crest, his chakra-laced feet giving him perfect traction. You know, for a guy with so much power, your aim is pretty terrible. With a puff of smoke, a dozen shadow clones appeared around him. They scattered across the ice field, all of them grinning with the same infuriating confidence. Come on, they shouted in unison. Is this really the best UA has to offer? This was Naruto's strategy. He wouldn't meet overwhelming force with overwhelming force. He would meet it with contempt. He would show Todoroki that his powerful, one-dimensional attacks were useless against a truly skilled opponent. Todoroki's rage intensified. He was being made a fool of. He unleashed a constant barrage of ice, trying to track and eliminate all the clones at once. But for every one he managed to freeze, 2 more would take its place. Their taunts chipping away at his composure. The temperature of the arena plummeted. Frost began to form on Todoroki's own body, a fine white layer creeping up his right arm and the side of his face. He was slowing down, his movements becoming stiffer. You're getting slow, the real Naruto said, appearing suddenly behind him. Todoroki spun around, lashing out with a backhand of solid ice, but Naruto ducked under it with ease. Pushing your body past its limit like this, it's a foolish way to fight. I don't need his power to defeat you. Todoroki roared, unleashing a point-blank blast of frost. Naruto was thrown back, sliding across the ice. He came to a stop, shaking the frost from his jacket. You keep saying that, he said, his voice losing its mocking edge, replaced by a cold seriousness. You keep talking about his power. It's not his power, it's yours. What are you, a child throwing a tantrum? The word struck a nerve deeper than any physical blow could. Todoroki's face contorted in a mask of fury. You know nothing about me. I know enough. Naruto shot back, his voice rising to match Todoroki's. I know a man who was so trapped by his hatred for his father that he's willing to cripple himself just to spite him. You think that makes you strong? It makes you a prisoner. He charged forward, blurring past the ice spears that erupted to stop him. He formed a Rasengan in his palm. The high-pitched shriek of the technique cutting through the air. Todoroki met the attack with a thick wall of ice. The Rasengan tore through it like a drill, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. Through the exploding ice, Naruto's fist connected with Todoroki's stomach. It wasn't a chakra-infused, bone-shattering punch. It was a solid, grounding thud. It was the kind of punch you throw to wake someone up. Todoroki staggered back, the wind knocked out of him, a gasp of pain and shock escaping his lips. It's your power, Todoroki. Naruto yelled, his voice echoing in the stunned silence of the stadium. Not his. It belongs to you. Todoroki looked up, his vision swimming. Naruto's words, the raw conviction behind them, broke through the icy shell he had built around his heart. A memory, long suppressed, flashed in his mind. His mother, her smile gentle, telling him it was okay to be who he wanted to be, that he wasn't a prisoner of his bloodline. He remembered All Might on the television, saving people with a smile. He remembered why he had wanted to be a hero in the first place. His father's ambition, his mother's pain, his own hatred, it had all been a cage. A low growl rumbled in his chest. And then it happened. FWOOSH. A column of brilliant, crimson flame erupted from his left side. It wasn't the controlled, furious fire of endeavor. It was a wild, joyful, liberated torrent of power. The heat was immense, instantly melting the glacier that had dominated the arena, sending clouds of thick steam billowing into the sky. Todoroki stood in the center of the swirling vortex of fire and steam. His left side wreathed in flame, his right side still emitting a frosty aura. The frost on his body vanished, his movements fluid once more. A wide, almost feral grin spread across his face. It was the first real smile anyone had ever seen from him. Thank you, Uzumaki, he said, his voice clear and strong. You're right, I have been a fool. He settled into a fighting stance. His entire demeanor changed. He was no longer a rebel fighting his past. He was a warrior embracing his full potential. But the lesson is over. Now, let me show you everything I've got. Naruto grinned back, a real, toothy, battle-hungry grin. This was it. This was the fight he had wanted. Now you're talking. What followed was a battle on a scale the sports festival had never seen. It was a clash of elements. A dance of gods. Todoroki unleashed waves of fire that Naruto's clones countered with small, concentrated bursts of wind-style chakra, turning the flames back. He sent shards of ice flying like bullets, which Naruto either dodged or shattered with chakra-infused kunai. The power on display was terrifying. Smintos and Midnight were on their feet, ready to end the match. In the stands, Endeavor was screaming, not in rage, but in triumphant ecstasy. SHOOOTOOOO. Finally, they both knew it was time to end it. They stood facing each other across the ruined stage, panting, bruised, but whole. One more, Todoroki yelled, channeling all of his remaining energy. He brought his hands together, ice and fire swirling into a massive, unstable ball of elemental fury. Naruto's expression became deadly serious. He brought his own hand up, red chakra bubbling around it, mixing with the blue. He poured a sliver of Kurama's power into his attack. Just a taste, Kurama. He formed a Rasengan that was larger, more violent, and tinged with a sinister crimson hue. They charged. This is it. Present Mike screamed. Ice and fire met the spiraling vortex of chakra in the center of the ring. The resulting explosion was not a sound, but a void. A sphere of white light expanded, vaporizing the stage and silencing the entire world for a single, terrifying second. Smintos threw up wall after wall of concrete, the barriers cracking and groaning under the strain. When the light faded and the smoke began to clear, the scene was one of utter devastation. The ring was gone, replaced by a deep, glassy crater. On one side, Todoroki was slumped against a partially shattered concrete wall, unconscious, his body pushed far beyond its limits. On the other side, Naruto stood. His jacket was torn, his arm was burned and bleeding, but he was on his feet. He was the only one left standing. Midnight, her own costume in tatters, shakily raised her arm. Chi Todoroki is unable to continue. The winner is Naruto Uzumaki. The crowd was silent for a moment, processing the sheer, apocalyptic power they had just witnessed. Then, they erupted. The roar was deafening, a tribute to the two young men who had just put on a battle for the ages. Naruto limped across the crater, the crimson energy around his arm fading. He stood over the unconscious Todoroki. He had won the match, but more importantly, he had won the war. He reached down and, with his good arm, began to haul his new friend, his new rival, towards the infirmary. As the raw energy of the battle dissipated into the atmosphere, the unseen watcher felt a surge of satisfaction. It had seen enough. The vessel was strong, capable of channeling a significant portion of the tailed beast's power. And the world itself, it was ripe. The energies here were potent, chaotic, and utterly unguarded. The harvest could begin soon. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Eye of the Hurricane. The scent of antiseptic and regret hung heavy in the air of the infirmary. Naruto lay on a sterile cot, shirtless, as the aged pro-hero recovery girl tutted and fussed over the angry red burns covering his right arm and shoulder. Her quirk, a rejuvenating kiss, sped up the healing process by consuming his stamina, leaving him feeling drained and hollowed out, as if he'd run 100 miles. Reckless, she chided, her voice like cracking parchment. You and that Todoroki boy. Using your quirks like you have spares. You're lucky you only got away with severe burns and chakra exhaustion. Any more and you'd have cooked yourself from the inside out. Naruto offered a weak, tired grin. Comes with the territory, Granny. The nickname earned him a light smack on the head with her syringe-shaped cane. I am not your granny. Have some respect for your elders. You orange-clad menace. On the cot next to his, Shoto Todoroki was already sitting up, a bandage wrapped around his head. The wild, liberated energy from their battle had settled into a quiet, profound calm. The storm in his eyes had broken, leaving behind a clear, steady gaze. He looked over at Naruto, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. No words were needed. The Y had spoken a universal language of fists and elemental fury on the battlefield, and they had understood each other perfectly. The infirmary door slid open, and a hesitant Ochako Uraraka peeked inside. Followed by a more composed Momo Yaoyorozu. We heard you were in here, Ochako said, her eyes wide with concern as she looked at Naruto's burns. Are you okay? Never better. Naruto grew. NTED as recovery girl applied a soothing salve. Just a little crispy. Momo stepped forward, her expression a mixture of awe and clinical analysis. The energy output in that final exchange was unprecedented. The stadium's sensors shorted out trying to measure it. The faculty had to erect emergency barriers. To wield such power, and to control it, it's truly astounding. Thanks, Naruto said, though her praise felt oddly detached. Like she was describing a natural disaster rather than a person. He preferred Ochako's simple, honest worry. Your next match is against Bakugo, Todoroki stated, his voice a low rumble. It wasn't a warning, it was a statement of fact. He will not be like me. He is not looking for a revelation. I know, Naruto said, his gaze hardening slightly. He's looking for a war. As if summoned, the subject of their conversation appeared in the doorway. Katsuki Bakugo stood there, his red eyes blazing with an intensity that seemed to suck the air out of the room. He wasn't looking at Todoroki. His entire being, every fiber of his explosive rage, was focused solely on Naruto. You, Bakugo snarled, his voice a low, dangerous growl. Don't you dare think for a second this is over. That little light show with Icy Hot, that was just the appetizer. He took a step into the room, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. You fixed him. You played therapist in the middle of a damn fight. You think I need that? You think I have some problem you can punch out of me? No, Naruto said calmly, meeting his glare without flinching. I think you're an asshole. But that's your business. The bluntness of the reply seemed to short-circuit Bakugo's rage for a split second. He had expected denial, or a counter-threat. Not a simple, dismissive diagnosis. When we get in that ring, Bakugo continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, a promise of violence more terrifying than any scream, don't you hold back. Don't you dare try to Save me. You come at me with that same power you used on him. You come at me with everything you have. I want to fight the monster that killed that Nomu. I want to beat that guy. If you give me anything less, I will never forgive you. He turned on his heel and stormed away, the door slamming shut in his wake, leaving a vibrating, hostile silence. Ochako looked pale. He's really intense. Naruto sighed, leaning back against his pillow. The raw, desperate need for validation in Bakugo's eyes was painfully familiar. He saw the boy who had been praised for his power his whole life, who had built his entire identity on being the strongest. Now confronted with a mountain he couldn't comprehend, let alone blast his way through. Bakugo didn't want a fight. He wanted proof that the mountain was climbable. He just wants to be acknowledged. Naruto said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. He's going to be disappointed. The final match. The roar of the crowd was a familiar backdrop now, the sun beating down on the cratered, hastily repaired stage. Naruto stood opposite Bakugo, the tension between them a living entity. Bakugo was practically vibrating, small, almost invisible sparks dancing at his palms. His grin was a razor's edge, a mask of feral anticipation. Naruto, by contrast, was perfectly still. His burns were healed, leaving his skin tender, but his chakra reserves had been partially restored. He wasn't tired. He was focused. He had a job to do. Finally, Bakugo screamed as Present Mike gave the signal to start. No more talking. No more games. Just destruction. He blasted off the ground. Not with a simple forward propulsion, but with a series of smaller, controlled explosions from his palms, creating a chaotic, unpredictable trajectory. It was his signature move, the howitzer impact, adapted for mobility. He was a human pinball of explosive force, careening through the air towards Naruto. AP shot, he roared, focusing his explosion into a narrow, armor-piercing beam. The attack was incredibly fast, searing a hole through the concrete where Naruto had been standing a microsecond before. But Naruto was already gone, having flickered to the other side of the arena. Bakugo didn't let up. He spun in midair, firing off another AP shot, then another. He filled the air with concentrated blasts, forcing Naruto to constantly use his body flicker to evade. To the crowd, it looked like a desperate dance. Naruto narrowly avoiding obliteration at every turn. It seems Uzumaki is on the defensive. Present Mike yelled. He can't get close. Bakugo's aerial superiority is overwhelming. In the stands, Momo frowned. No, that's not it. Look at Naruto's movements. They're not evasive. They're deliberate. She was right. Naruto wasn't just dodging. With every flicker, he was studying. He was mapping Bakugo's trajectory, timing the interval between his blasts, analyzing the subtle shifts in his body as he adjusted his aim. He was letting Bakugo empty his clip, showing him that his greatest weapon was nothing more than a predictable, easily avoided tantrum. Is that all you can do? Naruto called out, his voice calm and clear over the roar of explosions. Run away and shoot sparks. I've seen academy students with better aim. The taunt hit its mark. Bakugo let out an incoherent roar of fury and changed tactics. He flew higher, his hands glowing with a ferocious intensity. Then let's see you dodge this. Stun grenade. He unleashed a massive, non-lethal explosion of pure light and sound, designed to incapacitate any opponent. The entire stadium was momentarily blinded. But when the light faded, Bakugo was met with an impossible sight. 10 Narutos stood on the field, all of them looking up at him with identical, unimpressed expressions. Which one is the real one, genius? One of them yelled. Bakugo's eye twitched. It doesn't matter. I'll just blow you all to hell. He dove, his hands crackling, aiming for the center of the group. But the clones scattered, and suddenly, he was surrounded. Not just by 10, but by 50. They swarmed him, not to attack, but to obstruct. They leapt into his path, forcing him to blast them away, filling the air with smoke. They grabbed onto his legs, his arms, forcing him to expend energy and focus just to shake them off. They were a persistent, infuriating gnat storm of orange jumpsuits. Get off me, you damn clones! He screamed, spinning like a top, unleashing a continuous circle of explosions. And in that moment, when his focus was divided, his vision obscured, and his rage at its peak, the real Naruto made his move. He flickered, not to the side or behind, but directly above Bakugo, in the eye of the hurricane. He fell from the sky, a silent, descending shadow. Bakugo's instincts screamed a warning. He looked up, his eyes widening in shock as Naruto descended upon him. He raised a hand to fire a point-blank blast, but he was too late. Naruto's foot connected with the back of Bakugo's gauntlet, a precise, powerful kick that sent the grenade-like piece of support gear flying. In the same motion, Naruto's other hand chopped down on Bakugo's wrist, a sharp, stinging blow to the nerve cluster there. Bakugo's hand went numb, his ability to create fine-tuned explosions momentarily shorted out. They hit the ground, and Naruto was a blur of motion. It wasn't ninjutsu. It was pure, unadulterated taijutsu. The shinobi martial art of the highest level. He didn't punch Bakugo. He didn't hit him with a Rasengan. He dismantled him. A palm strike to the shoulder joint, dislocating it with a sickening pop. A leg sweep that took Bakugo's feet out from under him. As Bakugo fell, Naruto was already there, one hand grabbing the front of his shirt, the other holding a three-pronged kunai to his throat. The entire exchange had taken less than 3 seconds. The smoke cleared. The stadium fell into a shocked, profound silence. Katsuki Bakugo, the embodiment of explosive power, was on his knees, his arm useless, his body trembling. With a strange, bladed weapon held against his neck by an opponent who didn't even seem to be breathing hard. He had been utterly, completely, and humiliatingly defeated. He hadn't landed a single blow. "It's over," Naruto said, his voice low and devoid of triumph. "You lose." Bakugo's body trembled, not with fear, but with a rage so deep and volcanic it had no outlet. This wasn't the defeat he wanted. This wasn't the glorious battle against a monster he had demanded. He had been dissected, neutralized, treated not like a rival, but like a faulty piece of equipment that needed to be disarmed. It was the ultimate humiliation. "I'll kill you," he whispered, the words choked with a venomous promise. He began to struggle, to thrash, but Naruto's grip was like iron. Midnight cautiously approached. Bakugo is unable to continue. The winner, and the champion of the UA Sports Festival, is Naruto Uzumaki. The crowd's reaction was muted, confused. They had just witnessed a mugging, not a fight. As soon as Midnight declared him the winner, Naruto released Bakugo and stepped back. Bakugo immediately scrambled to his feet, his good arm sparking, his eyes wild with a truly murderous light. But before he could lunge, the gray capture weapon of Aizawa shot out from the sidelines, enveloping him and neutralizing his quirk. He was bound, screaming, and dragged off the stage. The awards ceremony was a surreal spectacle. Todoroki stood calmly on the third-place platform. Naruto stood on the first. The second-place platform was occupied by a furious, snarling Bakugo, who was literally chained to the block, a muzzle-like restraint over his mouth to stop him from screaming obscenities. All Might arrived to present the medals, his smile looking strained. He gave Todoroki his medal along with a few quiet words of encouragement. Then he approached Bakugo. He hesitated, then leaned in and removed the muzzle. "Why did you go easy on me?" Bakugo immediately roared, his voice raw. He wasn't yelling at All Might. His crazed eyes were locked on Naruto. "You beat him with that giant fireball. Why didn't you use it on me? You think I'm weaker than him. You were looking down on me." All Might sighed, placing the medal in Bakugo's mouth, as it was the only way to get it on him. Then, he turned to Naruto. He held up the gold medal. "Young Uzumaki," All Might said, his voice low enough for only Naruto to hear. "Congratulations. Though your methods are unorthodox, your strength is undeniable." He placed the heavy gold medal around Naruto's neck. It felt cold and meaningless. "What you did for young Todoroki, you have my thanks. But what you did to young Bakugo, I fear you may have created a wound that will never heal." "He wanted me to acknowledge him," Naruto replied quietly. "So I did. I showed him that his power, by itself, is not enough." As All Might raised his arms to the cheering crowd, Naruto looked out at the sea of faces, and the feeling returned. The cold, piercing gaze of the Otsutsuki. It was stronger than ever, a tangible pressure at the back of his skull. It wasn't just watching anymore. It was present. It was as if the active energy of the festival had acted as a massive beacon, guiding it to this exact location. The watcher was no longer watching from afar. It was here, somewhere in this city, in this world. The cheers of the crowd faded to a dull roar. The gold medal felt like a lead weight. The fun was over. The game had ended. The real enemy had just arrived at the gate, and he was the only one who could hear the knocking. Later that evening, long after the crowds had gone home and the stadium was a silent, empty husk, Naruto stood on the highest tier, looking down at the ruined arena. The medal was in his hand, the metal cool to the touch. A heavy price for a hollow victory. The voice, deep and laced with fire, startled him. He turned to see the number 2 hero, Endeavor, standing a few feet away. His arms crossed over his massive chest, his turquoise eyes glowing in the twilight. "You," Naruto said, his stance shifting subtly into one of readiness. "I am not here to fight you, boy," Endeavor grumbled. "I am here to deliver a message. You awakened my son's full power. You gave him a taste of true battle. For that, you have my gratitude." The word sounded like acid on his tongue. "But do not mistake this for friendship. You are now the benchmark. You are the wall that Shoto must overcome to fulfill his purpose, to surpass All Might and become number 1. I will see to it that he uses the power I gave him to crush you. You have not created a friend today. You have only forged a better weapon for my ambition." Endeavor turned, his flame-wreathed body casting a long, dancing shadow. "Enjoy your victory. It will be your last." He strode away, leaving Naruto alone with the chilling words and the even more chilling presence he could still feel lurking at the edge of his senses. He was a champion in a world he didn't understand, with a new, powerful enemy in the open and an ancient, divine one hiding in the shadows. He was utterly, completely alone. "That's quite a burden you carry." He turned again. Momo Yaoyorozu was standing at the entrance to the seating tier, her usual confident posture replaced by a quiet, somber respect. She walked over, not stopping until she was beside him at the railing. "I saw what you did," she said softly, looking out at the cratered field. "For Todoroki-san, and for Bakugo-san, you weren't just trying to win. You were teaching them. In your own, brutal way." She turned to him, her dark eyes searching his. "That kind of power, that kind of insight, it doesn't come from a quirk. It comes from experience, the kind that no one our age should have." He didn't answer, just continued to stare out at the darkened stadium. "You're not from here, are you, Naruto?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Not just another country, another everything. And you're preparing for something. A fight that has nothing to do with hero rankings or sports festivals. That's why you're here, isn't it?" Naruto finally looked at her. He saw no judgment in her eyes, only a fierce, brilliant intelligence trying to piece together an impossible puzzle. He saw an ally. He gave a slow, weary nod. "The festival is over," he said, his voice low and heavy with the weight of worlds. "And the real war is about to begin." Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. Scars and Shadows. The silence on the stadium roof was a fragile thing, easily broken by the distant sirens of the city below. Naruto leaned against the railing, the cold metal a stark contrast to the warmth of the gold medal still clutched in his hand. He wasn't looking at the city, but at the empty space beside him where Momo Yaoyorozu now stood. A silent companion in the twilight. Her question hung in the air between them. "That's why you're here, isn't it?" He finally broke the silence, his voice low. "I didn't choose to come here. Something pulled me from my world into yours. The energy felt ancient, powerful. And I think it's still here. Watching." Momo processed this, her mind not rejecting the impossible premise but dissecting it. Analyzing its implications. "An entity capable of interdimensional travel," she murmured, her gaze turning analytical. "Its power must be beyond anything this world has ever seen. Beyond All Might. Beyond even you." "Yeah," Naruto said, the single word heavy with confirmation. "That's about the size of it." He finally uncurled his fist, looking at the gaudy gold medal. "This festival, all this power on display, I think it was like a dinner bell. It drew the attention of the thing that brought me here. So you entered the tournament, not just to win, but to create a beacon," Momo deduced. Her eyes widening with the terrifying logic of it. "You made yourself the brightest light so you could draw the moth out of the shadows." He gave her a sidelong glance, a flicker of genuine surprise in his eyes. She wasn't just smart, she was perceptive on a level that bordered on precognition. She understood strategy, the harsh calculus of sacrifice and risk that had defined his entire life as a shinobi. For the first time since arriving, he felt a sliver of his profound loneliness begin to recede. He wasn't entirely alone in his understanding. Something like that, he admitted. He tossed the medal from hand to hand. I just didn't expect to get sidetracked with Todoroki-san and Bakugo-san. She asked softly. I know what it's like, he said, his gaze becoming distant. To be trapped by your past. To have a power that makes people fear you. To feel like you have to scream just to prove you exist. He looked at Momo, and for a moment, the war hero, the Jinchuriki. The demigod of the battlefield was gone, replaced by a young man bearing the weight of too many scars. I couldn't just stand by and watch. Momo felt a powerful, aching empathy for him. She reached out, her hand hovering for a moment before she gently placed it on his arm, over the fabric of his torn uniform. It was a simple, grounding gesture of support. You don't have to bear it alone, Naruto. I may not understand the world you came from, but I understand tactics. I understand resource management, and I understand the need for allies. Her voice was firm, a quiet promise in the cool night air. Let me help you. Naruto looked down at her hand, then back to her earnest, intelligent face. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was enough. 2 days later, Class 1A was back in their homeroom. The aftermath of the sports festival still clinging to them like static. Aizawa, looking marginally less mummified, stood at the podium. The fallout from the festival is significant, he grumbled. His voice a tired rasp. You've all been scouted. This afternoon, we'll be going over your internship offers. But first, you need hero names. The names you choose now will stick with you for the rest of your careers. So choose wisely. Midnight entered the room with a stack of whiteboards, adding a theatrical flair to the proceedings. One by one, the students went up, presenting their chosen aliases. Froppy, Uravity, Red Riot. Each name was a reflection of their personality, their quirk, their ambition. When it was Naruto's turn, a hush fell over the room. What name would the boy who defied all classification choose? He walked to the front, took a marker, and wrote 2 simple, sharp characters on the board before turning it around. Shinobi, Shinobi, he said, his voice even. It's what I am. There was a beat of confused silence. Dude, that's just a word, Kaminari said. Like a ninja, right? It is more than a name, Naruto replied, his gaze sweeping over his classmates. It is a promise. It means to endure, to protect from the shadows, to do what must be done, no matter the cost. It is my code. The explanation, delivered with a quiet, unshakable conviction, silenced any further questions. It wasn't a cool moniker, it was a declaration of identity. Aizawa gave a slow, tired nod of approval. It was a fitting, if somber, choice. Later that afternoon, the internship offers were projected onto the main screen. As expected, Todoroki and Bakugo had thousands of offers each. But the numbers next to Naruto's name were staggering. Over 10,000 offers, from every top agency in Japan and several from overseas. He had more offers than the rest of the class combined. 10,000. Mina shrieked, her eyes bugging out. You Sue, LD have your pick of any hero in the world. Indeed, Aizawa said, scrolling through the list. The top offer, unsurprisingly, is from the number 2 hero, Endeavor. A cold silence fell over the room. Everyone looked from Todoroki, who stiffened in his seat, to Naruto, whose expression remained impassive. He wishes to personally supervise the development of the young man who unlocked his son's potential. Aizawa read from the official offer, his tone dripping with disdain. A transparent attempt to study you like a lab rat. I am professionally obligated to present the offer. Respectfully decline, Naruto said instantly. His voice sharp. Tell him I'm not interested in being a training dummy for his family drama. The class let out a collective, nervous breath. To so bluntly refuse the number 2 hero was unheard of. Very well, Aizawa said, a hint of a smirk on his face as he deleted the offer. The next highest is from the agency of the number 4 hero, Best Genist, followed by Hawks. Mirko. Every top 10 hero has made an offer. including one from All Might himself, offering a personal internship. This was the one, the chance to train with the symbol of peace. But Naruto's eyes scanned the long list, passing over the famous names, the powerful agencies. He was looking for something specific. A location. That one, he said, pointing to a name far down the list. Aizawa squinted. Manual. A very respectable, if low-profile, hero. His quirk allows him to control small amounts of water. He's effective, but why him? His office is in Hosu City. Hosu is a major metropolitan hub, Naruto said. His reasoning clear and concise. It has a high population density and complex infrastructure. It's the perfect place to practice search and rescue and urban mobility. And a smaller agency means more hands-on experience, less time spent on interviews and publicity events. The logic was sound, impeccable even. But Momo knew the real reason. A major city was a mass source of the chaotic energy he believed was drawing his enemy. He wasn't choosing an internship. He was choosing a hunting ground. Hosu City was a blur of steel, glass, and neon. The Shinkansen bullet train pulled into the station, and Naruto stepped out into the bustling metropolis, a small bag slung over his shoulder. The hero Manuel was a pleasant, unassuming man who seemed slightly bewildered to have the sports festival champion as his intern. Their first day was spent on a routine patrol, mostly giving directions and helping retrieve a cat from a tree, a task Naruto accomplished with a single gravity-defying leap that left Manuel speechless. But beneath the mundane surface of the city, Naruto's senses were screaming. The Otsutsuki presence was here. It was no longer a vague, distant pressure. It was a sharp, cold spike in the city's chakra, a discordant note in a symphony of life. It was close. That night, after his patrol with Manuel ended, Naruto slipped out of the hero's small apartment. He leapt to the rooftops, his dark UA tracksuit a perfect camouflage in the night. He moved silently through the concrete canyons, his senses cast out like a net. He felt the city breathe. He felt the distant anger of Tenya Iida, who was also interning in this city for his own dark reasons, and he felt the cold, alien presence moving through the alleys below. He found it in a narrow, trash-strewn alley, far from the bright lights of the main thoroughfares. The figure stood with its back to him, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of a flickering street lamp. It was tall and unnaturally slender, dressed in flowing white robes that seemed to absorb the light. Two horn-like protrusions jutted from its forehead, and its skin was a pale, ghostly white. The figure turned, and Naruto felt a jolt of ice in his veins. The eyes were pupil-less, a uniform, unnerving lavender. The Byakugan. So, the little vessel reveals itself, the being said, its voice a smooth, melodic whisper that held no warmth. It was a sound that was fundamentally inhuman. I must confess, I am impressed. The ninth chakra is strong in you. Much stronger than the other broken little pieces scattered across our old home. Naruto dropped from the rooftop, landing silently on the grimy pavement 20 feet away. He didn't bother with questions. He didn't ask who or what this thing was. He knew. It was the enemy. Otsutsuki. Naruto snarled, the name tasting like poison. The being, Kenshiki, smiled, a slow, predatory stretching of its lips. So you remember our clan. Good. It will make the harvest less tedious. He tilted his head, his Byakugan seeming to look right through Naruto, into the raging sea of Kurama's chakra sealed within him. This world is fascinating. So much raw, untamed energy. So many primitive, chaotic powers. Once the God Tree is planted and fed this planet's life force, the resulting chakra fruit will be exquisite. The casual way it spoke of planetary genocide, as if discussing a fine wine, sent a wave of cold fury through Naruto. This was it. The war had found him. He didn't waste another moment. He blurred forward, a Rasengan already forming in his hand. The SHRIEK of the technique filled the narrow alley. Kenshiki didn't move. He simply raised his left hand, his palm open. The skin on his palm glowed with a faint red light. As Naruto's Rasengan was about to connect, a swirling vortex, a miniature dimensional rift, opened in Kenshiki's palm and simply absorbed the attack. The Rasengan vanished without a sound, without a trace. Naruto's eyes widened in shock. That was karma, a power only wielded by the highest-ranking members of the Otsutsuki clan. A clever little trick, Kenshiki said, his voice laced with patronizing amusement. He closed his hand, and the absorbed energy dissipated. But your techniques are ancient history to us, child of the prophecy. Before Naruto could react, Kenshiki moved. His speed was not the instantaneous flash of the body flicker, it was a pure physical velocity that seemed to bend space around him. He appeared before Naruto, his hand lancing out not for a strike, but for a simple touch. His fingers brushed against Naruto's chest. Agony. White-hot, blinding agony erupted from the point of contact. Naruto felt his own chakra being forcibly drained from his body, siphoned away by the Otsutsuki. He gasped, his muscles locking up, his vision tunneling. He felt Kurama roar in indignation from within the seal, but even the great Nine Tails' power was being drawn out like water from a well. Kenshiki pulled his hand back, observing his work. Naruto collapsed to one knee, panting, his body trembling with the shock of the violation. Yes, Kenshiki whispered, a gleam of ecstatic hunger in his lavender eyes. Perfectly ripe. Your power will serve as an excellent catalyst for the seedling. He turned, his robes swirling around him. A black, distorted portal opened in the air behind him. Rest now, vessel. End of this world will begin soon enough. And I will return for you when it is time to collect the final ingredient. The Otsutsuki stepped through the portal, and it snapped shut, leaving Naruto alone in the silent, grimy alley. He was shaking, not from fear, but from the chilling combination of his own powerlessness and the absolute certainty of the coming apocalypse. He had met the enemy, and he had been utterly, completely, and effortlessly defeated. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Hosu Reckoning. The grimy asphalt of the alley was cold and unforgiving against Naruto's cheek. For a long moment, he didn't move, his body a trembling, disconnected thing. The agony had faded, replaced by a profound, chilling emptiness. It was the echo of violation. Kenshiki hadn't just drained his chakra, he had feasted on it, a casual, contemptuous act of consumption that had left a phantom ache deep in his soul. Kurama's voice was a low, guttural rumble in the back of his mind. It wasn't the usual bellow of rage or sarcastic quip. It was something Naruto had not heard in a very long time, the sound of rattled, ancient fear. That was the power of the Ten Tails progenitor. The power that consumes worlds. He wasn't just tasting your chakra. He was tasting the planet through you. Naruto pushed himself up, his muscles screaming in protest. His reserves were dangerously low, leaving him feeling fragile. Human in a way he hadn't since he was a child. He looked at his trembling hands. The gap in power was absolute. All his strength, his speed, his Rasengan, the might of the Nine Tails itself, it had been nullified by a single, casual gesture. He was an ant trying to fight a god, and the god had just playfully plucked off one of his legs to see what he was made of. The despair was a thick, cloying thing, threatening to drown him. What was the point? He was stranded in a world of children, facing a monster that could devour planets. He was alone. Then, the city screamed. An explosion ripped through the night air a few blocks away, the sound a sharp crack followed by the deeper roar of collapsing infrastructure. Shouts and sirens erupted in a chaotic symphony. Another explosion, closer this time, and the ground shuddered. Naruto's head snapped up, the shinobi within him instantly overriding the beaten man. His enhanced senses picked up the signatures. Two were monstrous and twisted, reeking of the same mangled chakra as the Nomu from the USJ. The third was a cold, sharp spike of killing intent, slick with the metallic tang of blood. The despair didn't vanish, but it was shoved violently aside by the hot, familiar rush of purpose. People were in danger. The city was under attack. His personal war could wait. His duty was here, now. With a surge of will, he ced his remaining chakra to his feet and launched himself back into the night, a silent, orange shadow moving towards the chaos. Tenya Iida was going to die. He knew it with a cold, terrifying certainty. The hero killer. Stain stood over him, his monstrous blade poised to strike. The man's oppressive aura, a fanatical vortex of bloodlust and conviction, had paralyzed him more effectively than any quirk. His brother, his family's legacy, it was all going to end here in this dirty alley, a pointless sacrifice to his own foolish vengeance. A blur of green lightning shot past him. Izuku Midoriya, His face a mask of frantic determination, had arrived. But he too was outmatched, his movements predictable, his power raw and untamed. Stain was a true predator, his every move brutally efficient. He tasted Midoriya's blood, and the boy froze, paralyzed by the villain's quirk. Just as Stain raised his blade to finish Midoriya, a wall of ice erupted, separating them. Shoto Todoroki stood at the mouth of the alley. His left side already wreathed in flame, his right emitting a frosty mist. The battle that followed was a desperate one. But even with two of the class's strongest, Stain was a force of nature. He was faster, more experienced, his movements honed by a lifetime of killing. He was a wolf among sheepdogs. Suddenly, a new presence dropped into the alley, landing between the students and the hero killer with a soft, soundless impact. "You three have made a real mess of things," Naruto Uzumaki said, not even looking at them. His gaze was locked on Stain, and his voice was devoid of its usual warmth. It was cold, hard, and utterly serious. "Another fake," Stain rasped, his unnaturally long tongue darting out to lick his lips. "Drawn to the flashing lights and the promise of fame. You are not worthy of the name, hero." "Good," Naruto replied, his body sinking into a low, predatory crouch. "Because I'm not a hero." He moved. There was no Rasengan, no shadow clones, just pure, unadulterated speed. He closed the distance in an instant, a kunai appearing in his hand as if from nowhere. Stain, whose reflexes were legendary, barely had time to bring his own blade up to block. The screech of metal on metal echoed in the narrow alley. What followed was a battle that the UA students could barely comprehend. It wasn't a clash of quirks. It was a duel. Naruto didn't use any flashy techniques. He fought with a brutal, minimalist efficiency that made Stain's honed skills look clumsy. Every lunge from the hero killer was met with a precise parry. Every feint was ignored. Naruto wasn't reacting to Stain's movements, he was anticipating them, his body flowing around the villain's attacks like water around a stone. "Your killing intent is sloppy," Naruto said, his voice a low growl as their blades locked. "It's unfocused. You leak it everywhere like a broken faucet. A true killer is silent until the final strike." He spun, using Stain's own momentum against him, and the back of his heel connected with the villain's knee, buckling it. He didn't follow up with a finishing blow. He simply created distance again, his kunai held in a reverse grip. What are you?" Stain hissed, a flicker of genuine confusion in his wild eyes. This boy didn't fight like a hero. He fought like an assassin, but with none of the malice. He fought like a soldier. "I'm the guy who's going to stop you from killing anyone else tonight," Naruto stated. He saw an opening, a fractional shift in Stain's weight, and he exploited it. He flickered forward, and the fight was over. A precise chop to the wrist, forcing Stain to drop his blade. A palm heel strike to the chest that staggered him back. A sweeping kick to his other leg, forcing him to his knees. Before the hero killer could even register the sequence of attacks, Naruto had him pinned, the cold steel of the kunai once again pressed against his throat. From the sidelines, Todoroki, Midoriya, and Iida could only stare in stunned silence. He hadn't defeated Stain, he had systematically dismantled him. "It's done," Naruto said, a puff of smoke erupting beside him as a shadow clone appeared, already binding the incapacitated villain with a roll of high tensile wire. Just as the clone finished its work, a horrifying shriek filled the air. A winged Nomu swooped down into the street, its claws extended. It snatched up the paralyzed Midoriya and took to the sky. Before anyone could react, Stain did something unthinkable. With a roar, he broke free of the clone's bindings, his quirk activating as he licked a fleck of the Nomu's blood from his cheek. The creature froze in midair. Stain launched himself from the ground, plunged a hidden knife into the monster's exposed brain, and saved the very student he had been trying to kill moments before. He landed on the street, standing over the dead Nomu, and delivered his chilling, impassioned speech about the plague of false heroes, his killing intent washing over the assembled pros who had just arrived. His aura was so immense, so terrifying, that everyone, even the veteran hero Endeavor, was frozen in place. Everyone except Naruto, while the heroes were paralyzed by the sheer force of Stain's will. Naruto simply walked forward, his expression one of tired annoyance. He stepped right through the wall of killing intent as if it wasn't even there, and chopped the hero killer on the back of the neck. Stain crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Naruto looked at the crowd of stunned, terrified pro-heroes. "Someone want to clean this up?" he asked, his voice flat. "I'm tired." The official story was that Endeavor and the other pros had defeated the hero killer. Midoriya, Iida, and Todoroki were given credit for assisting. Naruto Uzumaki was not mentioned in any report. By the time the authorities had finished securing the scene, he had vanished. He found his way back to Manuel's agency, slipping in through a window. He was physically and emotionally spent. The brief, intense fight had drained his already taxed reserves, and the chilling memory of Kenshiki's touch still lingered. He collapsed onto his borrowed futon, and for the first time in a long time, sleep was a black, dreamless void that offered no respite. He awoke to a frantic knocking at the door. He stumbled to his feet, his body aching, and opened it to find a sight that shocked him more than any Nomu or Otsutsuki. Momo Yaoyorozu stood there, her hair slightly disheveled, her face pale with worry. Behind her stood Ochako, Tsuyu, and Mina, all of them looking equally frantic. They were all still in their hero costumes. "How?" Naruto started, his voice thick with sleep. "I used my quirk to create a high-frequency tracker and placed it on your bag before we left UA, Momo explained, her words coming out in a rush. "A precautionary measure. When we saw the news reports about Hosu, we saw the destruction, we thought we had to make sure you were all right. We took the first train." Ochako pushed past her, her brown eyes scanning him from head to toe. She saw the exhaustion, the faint bruises, the haunted look in his eyes. "Naruto, you were there, weren't you? You fought him." He didn't have the energy to lie. He just nodded. That was all the confirmation they needed. In a rush of unrestrained emotion, Ochako threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. Mina and Tsuyu crowded in, their expressions of relief so profound it was almost painful to watch. Momo hung back, her gaze sharp and discerning. She saw more than just a tired fighter. She saw the same look he'd had on the roof. The look of someone carrying a world-ending burden, only now it was 100 times heavier. "It's not just the hero killer, is it?" she said quietly, her voice cutting through the emotional reunion. "Something else happened last night." Before all of this, Naruto looked at her over Ochako's shoulder, and his carefully constructed walls finally crumbled. The loneliness, the crushing weight of his secret, the terror of his own powerlessness, it was too much to bear alone. He had tried, he had failed. He looked at these girls, his friends, his classmates, who had crossed a city in the middle of the night, defying rules and risking their internships, just because they were worried about him. He saw their fierce loyalty, their unwavering trust. He saw allies. He saw family. Later, in the quiet of Manuel's small office, the story came out. He sat them down, Momo, Ochako, and Todoroki, who had arrived shortly after, his own face a mask of grim concern. He told them everything, about his world, about the shinobi, about the tailed beasts. He told them about Kagaya Otsutsuki, a being who could destroy dimensions. And he told them about Kenshiki, the pale monster he had met in the alley, who had come to this world to plant a god tree and harvest its life force, and who had defeated him without even trying. The room was silent, the weight of his words pressing down on them. This was a threat beyond heroes and villains, beyond anything they had ever conceived. It was an extinction-level event personified. Ochako was pale, her hands covering her mouth, but her eyes held no doubt. Todoroki's expression was grim, but his fists were clenched in a silent, resolute anger. It was Momo who spoke first, her voice steady despite the world-shattering implications of what she had just heard. "A single enemy of that magnitude, no one in this world can face him. Not even All Might." She looked at Naruto, her dark eyes blazing with a fierce, strategic light. "You can't do this alone. You were a fool to even try." "I know," Naruto admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "So we need a new strategy," she continued, her mind already working, analyzing, formulating. "We can't fight him head-on. We need intelligence. We need to understand his abilities, his weaknesses. We need to prepare. And you need to get stronger. Stronger than you've ever been." Todoroki nodded, his heterochromatic gaze fixed on Naruto. My father is the number 2 hero. His agency has access to resources, intelligence networks. I can use them. I will help. Ochako finally lowered her hands. Her expression no longer one of fear, but of the same unwavering resolve she'd had before her match with Bakugo. I'm not as strong as you guys. I don't know anything about aliens or chakra. But I'm not going to stand by and watch our world die. Whatever you need, Naruto. Whatever it takes, I'm with you. Naruto looked at them, at the faces of his new comrades. The prodigy with control over 2 elements. The genius who could create anything she could imagine, and the girl with a heart as strong as gravity itself. He was still outmatched. The odds were still impossible. But for the same time since he had arrived in this strange, new world, he wasn't alone. A small, genuine smile touched his lips, the first he'd had since his fight with Kenshiki. He stood up, his gaze meeting each of theirs in turn. The weight was still there, but now, it was shared. All right, he said, his voice ringing with a renewed, unshakable purpose. Let's get to work. We have a world to save. Chapter 10 End.